Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The howl that echoed through the Ozark forest that night wasn't from any normal wolf. I know because I've heard every kind of wolf cry there is. This was different. This sound made my blood freeze and sent my German Shepherd, Duke, hiding under my desk. Something he hadn't done since we came back from Vietnam. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm a park ranger here in the Ozark National Forest, and this is the story of how I lost my best friend and discovered that some legends are better left unexplored. That evening started like any other late summer shift in my little ranger station. The air was thick enough to chew, and dark clouds were rolling in from the west. Duke lay at my feet, occasionally lifting his head to look out the window, his ears twitching at every little sound. Something was making him nervous, and that made me nervous too. You see, Duke isn't just any dog. He was my partner in Vietnam, where we worked together finding hidden traps and underground tunnels. He saved my life more times than I can count. When we both made it home, I couldn't bear to leave him behind. The Army let me keep him, and we've been inseparable ever since. The war left its marks on both of us. For me, it's the nightmares and the way my hands shake when helicopters fly overhead. For Duke, it's how he goes completely still when he senses danger, just like he was doing now. I checked my watch, 7:45 p.m. The sun was setting earlier these days, and the forest was already growing dark under those storm clouds. The old oak trees outside my window creaked and swayed, their branches casting strange shadows that reminded me of reaching hands. "What's got you worked up, boy?" I asked Duke, scratching behind his ears. He whined softly, pressing closer to my leg. In all our years together, I'd never seen him act quite like this. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Marcus, you copy?" "Over." It was Jenny Martinez, one of our newer rangers stationed about 5 miles north. "Copy, Jenny. What's up? Over." "Got another dead cow report from the Miller farm. Third one this month. This one's different, though. They're saying it looks like something tried to walk on its hind legs. Would you mind checking it out?" "Over." I felt a chill run down my spine, remembering the stories my grandfather used to tell me about this forest. Tales of giant wolf-like creatures that walked like men, hunting during thunderstorms. As a kid, I'd dismissed them as scary bedtime stories. Now, after 15 years as a ranger here, I wasn't so sure. "I'll head over there now," I replied, grabbing my gear. "Storm's coming in, though. Might be a quick visit." "Over." I gathered my usual equipment: flashlight, first aid kit, radio, and my service revolver. Then I added something extra: the silver bullets my grandfather had given me years ago. He'd had them blessed by someone from the local Cherokee tribe, saying I'd need them someday. I'd always kept them as a good luck charm, but tonight they felt necessary. As Duke and I stepped outside, the humidity hit me like a wet blanket. The air had that strange electric feeling that comes before a big storm. My compass was acting weird too, the needle spinning slightly before settling in completely the wrong direction. I'd seen this happen a few times before in certain parts of the forest, especially near the old burial mounds. We took my truck down the winding forest road, passing by those ancient burial mounds that dotted this part of the forest. They were small hills, really, covered in grass and trees, but you could tell they were man-made if you knew what to look for. Duke always refused to walk near them, and even now in the truck, he growled softly as we passed. The forest seemed unusually quiet. No bird calls, no insect sounds, nothing but the wind in the trees and the distant rumble of thunder. Even the usual summer fireflies were absent, replaced by strange bluish lights that seemed to flicker in the swampy areas between the trees. I'd seen these lights before, but never so many at once. As we approached the Miller farm, Duke suddenly stood up in the passenger seat, his hackles raised. A low, deep growl rumbled in his chest. His warning sound, the one he used to make in Vietnam when he sensed something dangerous nearby. I slowed the truck, scanning the tree line. That's when I saw them. Two glowing yellow eyes reflecting in my headlights about 8 feet off the ground. They weren't like any animal eyes I'd ever seen. They looked intelligent, and they were watching us. Before I could get a better look, lightning flashed, lighting up the sky and the forest around us. In that brief moment of brightness, I saw something that would change my life forever. A massive dark shape moving through the trees, walking upright like a man, but definitely not human. When my vision cleared, both the eyes and the shape were gone, but I knew we'd seen something real. Duke was still growling, and my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Not from my usual PTSD, but from something else. Something primal. The radio suddenly burst into static, making both Duke and me jump. Through the interference, I could barely make out Jenny's voice. "Marcus, is something here? Need help?" Then the radio went dead, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. I tried the radio again, but all I got was static. "Come on, Jenny, answer," I muttered, but nothing came through except crackling noises. Duke whined from the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the dark forest ahead. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming on the truck's roof. I had two choices: check on the Miller farm or head straight to Jenny's station. My gut told me Jenny needed help more than the Millers needed to show me another dead cow. I turned the truck around, tires splashing through growing puddles. That's when Duke started barking. Not his usual bark, but the sharp, urgent one he used to make when we found something dangerous in Vietnam. I slammed on the brakes and grabbed my flashlight. The beam cut through the rain, landing on something that made my stomach turn. There, at the edge of the road, was a cow, or what was left of one. It hadn't been eaten like normal predator kills. It looked more like something had pulled it apart, like a kid with a toy. But the weird part? The grass around it was glowing slightly, giving off a pale blue light like the swamp lights we'd seen earlier. "Stay," I told Duke, though I knew he wouldn't listen. We both got out of the truck, rain soaking us immediately. Duke stayed close to my leg as we approached the cow. The smell hit us first. Not just regular dead animal smell, but something else. Something that reminded me of burnt metal and ozone, like after a lightning strike. I crouched down to look closer, and that's when I saw them. Footprints. But not animal prints, not exactly. They were huge, maybe 15 inches long, and shaped almost like wolf tracks, but with 5 toes like a human hand. And they were giving off that same faint blue glow. "Thompson? That you?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. The voice came from behind me, but when I spun around with my flashlight, I was relieved to see Bill Carson, another ranger, emerging from the rain. He was an older guy, been working these forests for 30 years. "Bill, what are you doing out here?" "Same as you, I expect." Heard Jenny's call, then lost contact. "But first, you need to see something." He gestured for me to follow him into the trees. I hesitated. Duke was growling again, but this time at the forest itself. The trees seemed wrong. Some of them were twisted, their trunks and branches bent in ways that trees don't grow naturally. It looked like something huge had grabbed them and wrung them like wet towels. "Been finding these all evening," Bill said, shining his light on the twisted trees. "And look at this." He pointed to some marks on the bark. They were claw marks, but way too high up, at least 8 feet off the ground. Thunder boomed overhead. Closer now. In the flash of lightning that followed, I saw something that made me grab Bill's arm. Between the trees, maybe 50 yards away, stood dark figures. They were hard to make out, but I could see they were tall, really tall, and standing on 2 legs. The lightning flash ended, but their yellow eyes still glowed in the darkness. "Tell me you see that," I whispered. "Been seeing them all night," Bill said quietly. "They're hunting something, or someone." Duke's growl turned into a snarl. The figures started moving, not toward us, but parallel to our position, weaving between the trees with impossible grace for their size. They moved like shadows, almost flowing around the trunks. My radio suddenly screamed to life, making us all jump. Through the static, we could hear voices, not just Jenny's, but other rangers too. all talking over each other. They're surrounding the... Can't get a signal. Eyes in the dark. Need immediate backup. Then silence again. But now we knew one thing. Whatever these things were, they were all over the forest tonight. We need to get to the others, Bill said, his voice shaking slightly. Safety in numbers. As we hurried back to our vehicles, I noticed something else. All the usual forest sounds had stopped. No crickets, no frogs, nothing. It was like every animal in the woods was holding its breath. We decided to take both vehicles. Safer that way, in case one broke down. Bill would lead since his station was closer to Jenny's last known location. As we drove through the strengthening storm, I kept seeing flashes of movement in the trees. Sometimes it looked like the shadows themselves were moving, flowing against the wind. The rain was really coming down now, but something wasn't right about it. In my headlights, some of the drops seemed to be falling up instead of down. Duke noticed it too. He kept tracking the weird raindrops with his head, whining softly. Suddenly, Bill's truck ahead of us screeched to a halt. I slammed on my brakes, nearly hitting him. Through the rain-streaked windshield, I saw why he'd stopped. A massive tree had fallen across the road, but the way it had fallen, it looked like something had placed it there on purpose. We were about to get out and see if we could move it when Duke let out a bark that made my blood run cold. It was his warning bark, the one that meant immediate danger. I looked where he was looking, and my heart nearly stopped. Standing in the beam of my headlights was something impossible. Looked like a wolf, but it was standing upright on two legs, and it was huge. Its head nearly reached the top of the fallen tree. Its fur was dark as night, but its eyes, those terrible yellow eyes, seemed to stare right through me. Bill's voice crackled through the radio. "Marcus, don't move." But it was too late. The creature's head snapped toward Bill's truck, and in the next lightning flash, I saw more shapes emerging from the forest on both sides of the road. We were surrounded. That's when I remembered what my grandfather had told me about the silver bullets. When the thunderdogs hunt, they never hunt alone. Time seemed to freeze as we sat there in our trucks, rain hammering down around us. I counted at least 5 of those things now, each one as tall as a basketball hoop, with muscles rippling under their dark fur. They moved like wolves, but stood like people. And their eyes, those eyes looked way too smart. "Back up," Bill's voice crackled through the radio. Nice and slow. I started to shift into reverse, but Duke's bark stopped me. Looking in my rearview mirror, I saw why. 2 more of the creatures had appeared behind us. We were trapped. That's when Bill did something either really brave or really stupid. He flicked on his truck's spotlight, the big one we use to spot lost hikers at night. The beam caught the nearest creature full in the face. For a second, nothing happened. Then the thing did something that still gives me nightmares. It smiled. Not like a dog showing its teeth, but a real smile. Like it knew exactly what we were trying to do. Then it raised one massive hand-like paw and made a gesture I recognized from my military days. The signal for attack. Everything happened at once. Lightning cracked overhead, close enough to make my teeth rattle. When it hit, the creatures moved. They didn't just run. They sort of flowed, like living shadows, much faster than anything that big should be able to move. "Get out of the truck," Bill shouted through the radio. "They're going to..." He never finished. One of the creatures slammed into the side of his truck, flipping it like it was made of paper. The truck rolled once, twice, then crashed into a tree. Duke was already moving, and I followed his lead. We burst out of the passenger side door just as another creature hit my truck from the left. The impact sent the vehicle sliding sideways, right where we'd been sitting a second ago. "Bill!" I shouted, running toward his overturned truck. Duke stayed close, snarling at the shadows moving around us. The rain made it hard to see, but the creatures seemed to be holding back, watching us. I reached Bill's truck and found him crawling out the broken window. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, but otherwise looked okay. "The burial mound," he gasped, pointing into the forest. "We need to get to the burial mound." I thought he'd hit his head too hard, but Duke was pulling in that direction too. That's when I remembered. The burial mounds were the only places Duke wouldn't go near. Maybe there was a reason for that. We ran. I helped Bill while Duke guarded our backs, and we crashed through the wet underbrush toward the nearest burial mound. The creatures followed, but strangely, they kept their distance. Their yellow eyes glowed in the darkness around us, moving like fireflies between the trees. Thunder boomed again, and this time I felt something different, a kind of pressure in the air, like right before a big storm surge. One of the creatures threw back its head and howled. The sound was nothing like a normal wolf. It was deeper, almost like it had words in it. The sound went right through me, making my legs shake and my head spin. "Don't listen," Bill shouted. "Keep running." We were almost to the burial mound when my flashlight caught movement ahead. Another ranger stumbled out of the darkness, Jenny. She was soaked and muddy, but alive. "Get back," she yelled, waving her arms. "It's not safe, they're hurting us." A massive dark shape dropped from the trees behind her. Before any of us could shout a warning, the creature grabbed Jenny with one huge paw. Duke launched himself forward, but I grabbed his collar. Getting himself killed wouldn't help her. The creature lifted Jenny up to its face, sniffing her. In the beam of my fallen flashlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It looked like someone had mixed a timber wolf with a heavyweight boxer, added about 4 feet of height, and made it just human enough to be terrifying. Its face was wolf-like, but with a shorter snout, and its eyes. There was definitely human-like intelligence in those eyes. Then it spoke. The sound wasn't exactly words, more like deep growls arranged in a way that almost made sense. Jenny stopped struggling, her eyes going wide. It was like she could understand what it was saying. Bill pulled his gun. The creature's head snapped around at the sound. Jenny used that moment to pull her pepper spray and blast it right in the thing's eyes. It roared, dropping her, and she rolled away. "Run!" she screamed. We ran, but not before I saw something that turned my blood to ice. The creature was already recovering from the pepper spray, its eyes healing right before my eyes, and it looked angry. We reached the burial mound, scrambling up its muddy side. The creatures circled below, but just like Duke, they wouldn't step onto the mound itself. We had a moment to catch our breath, but we all knew it wouldn't last long. What are they?" Jenny gasped. "Dogmen," Bill said, his voice shaking. "The old stories. They're all true. They come with the storms. They hunt in packs, and they're smart, too smart." Lightning flashed again, and in that brief brightness I saw the full pack spread out around the burial mound. 8 of them, including one that stood taller than the rest. The alpha. It stared right at me with those intelligent yellow eyes, and I swear it nodded, like it was saying, "Well played. For now." "We can't stay here forever," Jenny whispered. She was right. The storm was getting stronger, and with each lightning strike, the creatures seemed to grow more agitated, more powerful. They weren't just hunting us, they were playing with us. And sooner or later, they'd figure out how to get us off this mound. I pulled out my radio, but all I got was static. Then, through the white noise, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Howls, coming through the radio itself. They were in our equipment somehow, using our own technology against us. Duke pressed against my leg, his fur standing on end, and I reached for the pouch of silver bullets in my pocket. I had a feeling we'd need them soon. Very soon. The rain kept falling, turning the burial mound's dirt into slippery mud under our feet. We stood back to back, me, Bill, and Jenny, with Duke in the middle, all of us watching the creatures circle below. Every few minutes, one of them would test our safe zone, reaching a paw toward the mound before pulling back like it had touched something hot. "My grandfather," Bill said quietly. "He told me these mounds were protected. Sacred. Ground. Now I know why." A crackling sound made us all jump. It was coming from Jenny's radio, the only one still working. Through the static, we heard a voice. "This is Ranger Mike Chen. Anybody copy? We've got situation at the East Station. Things out here. Need help?" Jenny grabbed her radio. Mike, can you hear me? Where exactly are you?" The reply was broken, but clear enough. "Near old fire tower. Something big out here. Hurry." The alpha dogman's ears perked up at the sound. It turned its massive head toward the east, then made that strange hand signal again. 3 of the creatures peeled away from our mound, flowing like shadows through the trees toward Mike's location. "They're hunting him," I said, "using our own radios to find people." "We have to help him." Jenny started forward, but Bill grabbed her arm. "That's what they want," he said. "They're trying to split us up." He was right. I'd seen this kind of thing in Vietnam. The enemy separating us, picking us off one by one. But we couldn't just let Mike face those things alone. I pulled out, my silver bullets holding one up in the rain. "Maybe these will help. My grandfather said they're special, blessed by the Cherokee to fight evil things. Worth a shot," Bill nodded. "Better than our regular bullets, which don't seem to do anything to them." I loaded the silver bullets into my revolver while Bill did the same with his. Jenny checked her pepper spray, though we all knew it would. "Only slow them down for a few seconds." "Okay," I said. "Here's the plan. We make for the fire tower. It's not far, and it's high ground. Maybe we can—" A howl cut me off, thank. But this one was different. It wasn't coming from the dogmen around us. It was Mike's voice turning into a howl halfway through a scream. Duke barked sharply, and we all saw it. The creatures below were smiling again. They knew they had us. Either we could stay on this mound until the storm washed us off, or we could try to help Mike and probably die trying. "We can't just—" Jenny started to say, but then something changed. The air got heavy, like right before a lightning strike, but worse. My hair stood on end and Duke whined in pain. The alpha dogman raised its head to the storm clouds and made a sound. Not a howl, but something deeper. The clouds above us started spinning, like a tiny tornado was forming. "They're controlling the storm," Bill whispered in disbelief. Lightning struck all around the burial mound, again and again. Each flash made the creatures glow slightly, like they were absorbing the power. The alpha grew larger, its muscles swelling, its yellow eyes blazing brighter. Then it did something impossible. It reached right into one of the lightning bolts and grabbed it. The electricity wrapped around its arm like a glowing rope. With a casual flick, it threw the lightning at our mound. We dove apart as the ground exploded where we'd been standing. The protection of the mound seemed to weaken. The creatures sensed it too. They started climbing up. "Run!" I shouted. "Head for the trees!" We scattered. I went left with Duke, Bill went right, and Jenny sprinted straight ahead. Just like we'd feared, the pack split up to chase us. I crashed through the underbrush, Duke leading the way. Behind us, I heard heavy breathing and the sound of massive paws. I risked a look back. 2 of the creatures were following, but strangely, they weren't running at full speed. They could have caught us easily, but instead they were hurting us, just like Jenny had warned. A scream rang out from somewhere to my right, Bill's voice. It ended in a wet gurgle that told me he was gone. Jenny was somewhere ahead, the beam of her flashlight bouncing through the trees as she ran. Duke suddenly skidded to a stop and I nearly fell over him. There was a cliff in front of us. Not a big one, maybe 15 feet down to a creek, but too far to jump. We turned to go back, but the dogmen were there, blocking our path. One of them spoke, that weird growling language again. The other answered, and they both laughed. The sound was horrible, like rocks in a blender. I raised my gun with the silver bullets, but before I could fire, lightning struck the trees behind the creatures. The flash blinded me for a second. When I could see again, the dogmen were gone. "Where?" I started to say, but Duke's growl made me spin around. They were behind us now, having somehow moved without making a sound. The bigger one lunged forward. I fired, the silver bullet catching it right in the chest. It stumbled back, actually looking surprised. Black blood oozed from the wound. But then the flesh started knitting itself back together. The creature looked down at the healing hole, then back at me. Its yellow eyes narrowed. They weren't playing anymore. "Duke," I whispered, "run!" But Duke didn't run. Instead, he did something he hadn't done since Vietnam. He stepped in front of me, planted his feet, and gave his attack bark. He was protecting me just like he always had. The creatures paused, seeming confused by this small dog challenging them. Then the alpha's howl echoed through the forest, and I knew we were out of time. The dogmen tensed to spring, lightning crackling around their massive forms. Duke stood his ground, snarling, and I raised my gun again, knowing we probably wouldn't survive the next few seconds, but determined to go down fighting. Sometimes that's all you can do. Time slowed down. Rain fell in sheets around us as Duke and I faced the two dogmen at the cliff's edge. I had 4 silver bullets left, and somewhere in the forest Jenny was still running. If she was still alive. The creatures attacked at the same time. Duke jumped at the smaller one while I fired at the bigger one. The silver bullet hit its shoulder, making it stumble. Black blood sprayed, but the wound started healing right away. A scream cut through the storm. Jenny's voice, followed by another horrible howl. My heart sank. Now it was just me and Duke. Lightning flashed, and suddenly the Alpha appeared next to the other 2 dogmen. It was even bigger now, its fur crackling with electricity. When it spoke in that weird growl language, I finally understood some of the words. Enough playing. The Alpha raised its arm, lightning dancing between its claws. I fired again, but it moved like smoke, the bullet passing right through where it had been. Then it was right in front of me, so tall it blocked out the sky. Duke lunged, his teeth sinking into the Alpha's leg. The creature roared, a sound so loud it shook leaves from the trees. It tried to grab Duke, but my dog was too quick, ducking and weaving like we'd trained for in Vietnam. I shot my second-to-last silver bullet at the Alpha's chest. This time it hit home. The creature staggered back, black blood pouring from a wound that wasn't healing as fast as the others. The Alpha looked at the wound, then at me, its yellow eyes glowing with rage. It raised both arms to the storm clouds and howled. Lightning struck it directly, over and over, until it was glowing like a blue sun. Duke barked a warning, but I was too slow. A bolt of lightning shot from the Alpha's hands, hitting me in the chest. Pain exploded through my body as I flew backward, landing hard on the muddy ground. Through blurry eyes, I saw Duke attack again, going right for the Alpha's throat. But one of the other dogmen grabbed him in mid-jump. "No!" I tried to shout, but my voice wouldn't work. I could only watch as the creature held Duke up, my brave dog still fighting, still trying to protect me. The Alpha walked over to me, its footsteps burning the grass with each step. It reached down with one massive paw, lifting me by my shirt until we were face to face. "Watch," it growled in almost English. "Watch what happens to those who enter our forest." It turned me toward Duke, still struggling in the other creature's grip. I tried to move, tried to raise my gun, but my body wouldn't respond from the lightning strike. Then I heard it. A sound I'd never forget. Duke's bark, but not his attack bark or his warning bark. This was the bark he used when he was telling me to run, to save myself. He was still trying to protect me right until the end. The creature holding Duke opened its jaws, and I wanted to close my eyes but couldn't. But Duke wasn't done fighting. With one last burst of strength, he twisted around and sank his teeth into the dogman's eye. The creature howled in pain, dropping Duke. My dog hit the ground running, but not away from danger. Instead, he ran straight at the Alpha holding me, launching himself at its face. The surprise attack made the Alpha drop me. I hit the ground hard, but my body finally responded. With shaking hands, I raised my gun and fired my last silver bullet straight into the Alpha's chest, right where its heart should be. The Alpha's roar of pain shook the whole forest. Lightning struck all around us as it stumbled backward, toward the cliff edge. Duke, still latched onto its throat, was pulling it off balance. "Duke, let go," I screamed. But I knew he wouldn't. Just like in Vietnam, he would never stop protecting me. The Alpha teetered on the cliff edge, trying to keep its balance. Duke gave one final, powerful shake of his head. They both went over. "Duke!" I ran to the edge, looking down through the eye. Rain. The creek below had turned into a raging river from the storm. There was no sign of Duke or the Alpha, just swirling dark water. A growl behind me reminded me I wasn't alone. I turned to face the remaining dogmen, my empty gun still raised. But something had changed. The creatures were backing away, their yellow eyes dimmed. Without the Alpha, they seemed weaker, smaller somehow. The storm was fading too, the lightning stopping, the clouds beginning to break up. One of the dogmen looked at me, then at the cliff, then back at me. It nodded, almost respectfully, before melting into the shadows of the forest. The others followed, disappearing like smoke between the trees. I fell to my knees in the mud, rain mixing with my tears. Duke was gone. My partner, my protector, my best friend, gone saving my life one last time. The storm clouds parted, revealing a full moon above, and from somewhere in the forest, I heard a howl, not the terrible sound of the dogmen, but a regular wolf's howl saying goodbye to one of its own. The next morning, the forest looked almost normal in the sunshine. Almost. The search teams found Jenny's body near the old fire tower, and Bill's not far from the burial mound. Mike's body was never found. The official report called it an animal attack, maybe bears or wolves. Nobody wanted to write down what really happened. I spent 3 days searching the creek and the riverbanks for Duke. Deep down, I knew I wouldn't find him. He'd given his life to save mine, just like he'd always been ready to do, from Vietnam to that final night. The Forest Service closed down that section of the Ozarks. They said it was because of storm damage, but I knew better. The twisted trees were still there, and sometimes at night you could see strange blue lights in the swamps. The burial mounds remained untouched, protecting their ancient secrets. I thought about quitting my job as a ranger, but that didn't feel right. Duke wouldn't have wanted that. So I stayed, keeping watch, making sure people stayed away from certain parts of the forest during storms. A month after that night, I was doing my evening patrol when I heard whining coming from behind my station. There, hiding under a bush, was a puppy. But not just any puppy. It looked like a mix between a wolf and a German shepherd, with unusually intelligent eyes. When it saw me, it didn't run away. Instead, it walked right up and sat at my feet, just like Duke used to do. Around its neck was an old piece of rope that seemed to glow slightly blue in the darkness. I couldn't prove it, but somehow I knew. This puppy had been sent to me. Maybe by the spirit of the forest, or maybe by Duke himself. I named him Thunder. These days, Thunder and I still patrol the Ozarks. He's grown into a strong, brave dog, just like Duke was. During storms, he sometimes stops and stares into the dark parts of the forest, growling softly. When that happens, I make sure we head the other way. The dogmen are still out there. Sometimes, on stormy nights, we hear their howls mixing with the thunder, but they keep their distance now. Maybe they remember what happened that night. Maybe they respect the sacrifice Duke made. I keep Duke's old collar in my desk drawer, along with one last silver bullet I found in my pocket after that night, just in case. Because now I know the truth about the forest. There are places where the old stories are more than just stories, where the line between normal and supernatural gets pretty thin. And on dark, stormy nights, when Thunder and I are safe at home, I swear I can hear a familiar bark in the distance. It's not a warning anymore. It's just letting me know that somewhere out there, Duke is still on patrol, still protecting his forest, still being a good boy, the best boy. The screams still haunt me at night, not the screams of people, those I could handle. After 15 years as an Army combat medic, I thought I'd heard every kind of scream there was. But the sounds that echo through these ancient redwood trees, they're different. They're not human. They're getting closer. My name is Elizabeth Morgan, and I'm a park ranger at Redwood National Park. Most people just call me Liz. At 42, I thought I had my life figured out. Work the park, help lost hikers, and try to forget about my past. But the forest had other plans. I'm standing here now, watching the morning fog curl around these giant trees like ghostly fingers. My hand automatically goes to the dream catcher hanging from my neck. The last gift from my daughter, Sarah, before she disappeared in these very woods 5 years ago. The police called it an accident. I called it impossible. A 10-year-old doesn't just vanish into thin air. The redwoods around me stretch up so high they seem to touch the clouds. Some of these trees were here before Jesus walked the earth. That's what my grandmother used to tell me. She was full of stories about these woods, passed down through generations of our tribe. Stories I should have paid more attention to. This morning feels different. The usual cheerful bird songs are missing, replaced by an eerie silence that makes the hair on my neck stand up. The mist is thicker than usual, turning the normal paths into mysterious tunnels between the massive tree trunks. Something's changed in my forest. Ranger Morgan, come in. The radio at my hip crackles to life, making me jump. It's Dave from the station. Morgan here, I respond, trying to keep my voice steady. We've got reports of weird markings on the trees, near Fern Canyon. Probably just some teenagers with spray paint, but could you check it out? On my way, I reply. But something in my gut tells me this isn't teenage graffiti. The dream catcher feels warm against my skin. Another thing my grandmother said to watch out for. As I start walking, I notice something strange about the tree beside me. There's a dark liquid oozing from its bark, too thick to be sap, too red to be natural. I reach out to touch it, then stop myself. After all these years in the forest, I've learned one important rule. Some things are better left untouched. Little did I know this was just the beginning. The forest was waking up, and with it something ancient, something hungry, something that had been waiting for me all along. I check my watch, 7:15 a.m. The sun should be stronger by now, but the mist only seems to be getting thicker. I take out my flashlight and map, marking my position. The strange markings Dave mentioned are about a mile north. As I start walking, I can't shake the feeling that something's watching me. Welcome to my story. I wish I could tell you it has a happy ending. But in these woods, not all endings are happy, and not all whispers should be answered. The fog grew thicker as I walked deeper into the forest. My boots made soft crunching sounds on the fallen leaves, but something was off about the noise. It seemed to echo just a moment too long, like someone else was walking right behind me. I kept moving toward Fern Canyon, where Dave had reported the strange markings. The morning was getting warmer, but the air around me felt ice cold. My breath came out in little white puffs like it does in winter, except it was the middle of summer. That's when I saw the first real sign that something was wrong. A group of deer stood frozen at the edge of the trail. Not moving, slowly frozen, but completely still, like statues. Their eyes were wide open, filled with fear. I've been a ranger for 8 years, and I've never seen animals act like this. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but when I got closer, the deer just crumbled. Like dried leaves, they fell apart and scattered in the wind. My hands were shaking as I radioed back to base. Dave, are you there? Static. Just empty static. I checked my phone, no signal. Typical for some parts of the forest, but I usually got at least one bar here. I marked the spot on my map and kept going. The dream catcher around my neck felt heavier with each step. Then I heard it. A whisper, soft as falling leaves, in a language I hadn't heard since my grandmother passed away. Our tribe's ancient language. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Wanagi Kichante, the voice whispered. Spirit in the heart. My grandmother's favorite saying. Hello? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Is someone there? The only answer was the wind in the trees, but it didn't sound right. It sounded like words just on the edge of understanding. I rounded a bend in the trail and stopped dead in my tracks. The trees ahead were covered in symbols, not spray paint like Dave thought, but deep cuts in the bark that leaked that same red sap I'd seen earlier. The symbols looked like the ones from my grandmother's old books, tribal warnings about dark spirits. As I stood there, my flashlight beam caught something moving in the shadows between the trees. Not an animal. It was too tall, too thin. Whatever it was slipped behind a massive redwood before I could get a good look. Just then, my radio crackled to life. Through bursts of static, I heard Dave's voice. Liz, come back. Hikers missing. Near your location. Missing hikers. My heart sank. As much as I wanted to run back to the station, I knew I had to check it out. That's my job, helping people who are lost or in trouble. But for the first time in my career, I was scared. Really scared. I took out my compass to check my direction, but the needle was spinning wildly, pointing everywhere and nowhere. The sun was hidden behind the thick fog, and without my compass, I had no way to know which way was which. The whispers grew louder, and now they seemed to be coming from the symbols on the trees. The red sap began to drip faster, making small pools on the ground. And in those pools I saw reflections of things that weren't there. Faces I didn't recognize. Shadows that moved on their own. My grandmother always said our forests held ancient spirits. Some good, some bad. She told me the dream catcher would protect me if I ever met one. I never really believed those stories until now. Something was in these woods with me. Something that knew my language, knew my history. And as another whisper floated past my ear, I realized with growing horror that it also knew my name. Elizabeth, it said, in my daughter Sarah's voice. Mom, help me. My heart stopped when I heard Sarah's voice. I knew it couldn't be real. My daughter had been gone for 5 years, but it sounded so much like her. Sarah, I whispered, even though I knew better. The dream catcher burned against my skin like a hot coal. Another voice answered, but this time it wasn't Sarah. It was my grandmother's voice speaking urgently. Don't answer it, little bird. That was her nickname for me. What pretends to be familiar isn't always friendly. I gripped my flashlight tighter and forced myself to think like a ranger, not a scared mom. There were missing hikers out here who needed help. I pulled out my notebook and wrote down everything I'd seen so far. Strange red sap on trees, animals turning to dust, weird symbols carved in bark, compass not working, voices in the woods. That's when I noticed something else weird. The trees around me seemed different. I've worked in this forest for years, and I know these redwoods like old friends. But these trees looked wrong. They were twisted in ways they hadn't been yesterday. Their bark darker, almost black. A twig snapped behind me. I spun around and saw something that made my blood run cold. About 50 feet away stood what looked like a person, but too tall, maybe 15 feet high. Its body was made of twisted branches and bark, with deep red sap oozing between the cracks. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness. Did what any normal person would do. I ran. My boots pounded against the dirt trail as I sprinted between the trees. Branches seemed to reach for me, trying to grab my jacket. The fog was so thick now I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Help! A real voice this time, young and scared. It came from somewhere to my left. I skidded to a stop. Through the mist, I saw an orange tent pitched between 2 huge redwoods. The missing hikers. Hello? I called out, trying to sound calm and professional. This is Ranger Morgan. Is everyone okay? A young man stuck his head out of the tent. He looked about 20, with a pale, frightened face. Oh, thank God, he said. Something's out there, something big. It took Katie. Katie? I asked, moving closer to the tent. My sister, he said. We were camping, and this morning she went to get water from the stream. Then we heard her scream. We tried to find her, but... He pointed at the ground. I looked down and saw footprints in the dirt. They started as normal human boot prints, then suddenly changed. The last few prints looked like tree roots had grown right out of the ground in the shape of feet. I'm Tom, the young man said. There's 3 of us left. Katie's boyfriend James is hurt. Something scratched his arm. I ducked into the tent. 2 more people were inside. Another young man with a bloody arm, and a girl about Tom's age who was trying to bandage it. Let me help, I said, pulling out my first aid kit. As I cleaned James's wound, I noticed something strange. The cuts looked like claw marks, but they were filled with what looked like tiny splinters. No, not splinters. Roots. Tiny roots growing. Under his skin. My radio crackled again. This time I could hear Dave clearly. Liz, get out of there now. We found something. The tribal elders say it's a Wendigo, a forest spirit. It's been sleeping for hundreds of years, but something woke it up. It possesses trees, and static cut him off. The dream catcher around my neck suddenly grew ice cold. Outside the tent, something moved in the fog. Something big. Tom's eyes went wide. "It's back," he whispered. The tent walls began to darken like huge shadows were surrounding us. A low growl rumbled through the ground, shaking the earth beneath our feet. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded like the forest itself was hungry, and we were trapped right in the middle of its hunting ground. "Everyone out of the tent now," I shouted, grabbing my backpack. Years of army training kicked in. When you're in danger, you move. We barely made it. The moment we scrambled out, giant roots burst from the ground, shredding the tent like paper. James stumbled, his injured arm now covered in bark-like patches. The roots under his skin were spreading. "This way." I pointed to a narrow path between the trees. "Stay close." The four of us ran through the fog. The ground rumbled beneath our feet, and all around us, trees were moving. Not just swaying in the wind, but actually turning to face us. There, branches reaching down like huge hands. My radio sparked to life again. "Liz?" It was Dave, and he sounded scared. "The tribal elders are here. They say the Wendigo is using the trees. It's trying to make a forest army. Each person it takes makes it stronger." I looked back at James. The bark on his arm had spread to his shoulder. His eyes were turning a deep, dark red. "Like tree sap, my grandmother told me stories," I said as we ran. "The Wendigo is an ancient spirit that got trapped in the forest. It sleeps for hundreds of years, then wakes up hungry. Not just for food, it's hungry for life itself." "How do we stop it?" Tom gasped, helping his friend run. Before I could answer, a horrible scream cut through the air. About 50 feet ahead of us stood Katie, or what used to be Katie. Her body was half human, half tree. Her skin rough like bark, her fingers long branches tipped with sharp thorns. Her eyes glowed red like hot coals. "Katie." Tom started forward, but I grabbed his arm. "That's not your sister anymore," I said, my heart breaking for him. I'd seen that same look of loss in my own mirror when Sarah disappeared. James fell to his knees, groaning. The bark had spread across his chest now. "Run," he managed to say through gritted teeth. "I can feel it in my head, trying to take over." Suddenly, my dream catcher blazed with heat. A memory flashed in my mind, my grandmother teaching me about spirits, about the old ways. "A Wendigo's power grows with fear," she had said, "but it can't touch a pure heart protected by love." I grabbed the dream catcher with both hands. It glowed with a soft blue light, pushing back the fog around us. Katie, the thing that was Katie, hissed and stepped back. The sacred circle. I remembered another of my grandmother's teachings. If we can make it to the old tribal grounds, there's a circle of stones. The elders used it to trap dark spirits. "Where is it?" Tom asked, supporting his transforming friend. I pointed to a hill in the distance. "Half a mile that way." "But..." I looked at James, who was fighting to stay. "Human, we have to hurry." The forest seemed to understand our plan. The trees closed in, their branches weaving together to block our path. The not Katie thing stalked toward us, leaving roots growing in her footsteps. Behind us, James let out a cry. That was half human, half wooden creak. My dream catcher pulsed with light, creating a small safe space around us. But I could feel it getting weaker. Whatever power it had was running out. And somewhere in the dark forest, a voice that sounded like my daughter kept calling my name, trying to make me lose focus, trying to make me afraid. The real test wasn't just surviving anymore. It was saving these kids, stopping this spirit, and maybe, just maybe, finding out what really happened to Sarah 5 years ago. But first, we had to make it to that stone circle. And the forest? The forest didn't want us to get there at all. We ran through the twisted forest, the dream catcher's blue light getting dimmer with each step. James was fighting hard against the change, but now his legs were turning to wood, making it harder for Tom to help him move. That's when I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There, hanging from a branch, was a small purple backpack. Sarah's backpack, the one she was wearing the day she disappeared. It looked exactly the same, right down to the unicorn keychain she loved so much. "Look out!" Tom's shout snapped me back to reality, just as a root whipped past my head. But now, I knew. I finally knew. The Wendigo took her, I whispered. It took my Sarah. The forest seemed to laugh, a dry, crackling sound like breaking branches. The voice that had been calling me changed. It wasn't Sarah's voice anymore. It was deep and ancient, like wind howling through dead trees. Your child feeds my forest, it growled, just as these new ones will. Anger burned inside me, hot and bright. 5 years of not knowing, 5 years of blame and guilt and endless searching, all because of this thing. My dream catcher suddenly blazed with light, brighter than before. I remembered what my grandmother said the day she gave it to me. A mother's love is the strongest magic there is, little bird. It can break any curse, fight any spirit. The circle is just ahead, I shouted to Tom and his friend, who was still human enough to walk. Through those trees, we could see it now, a ring of old stones half buried in the ground. They were covered in the same kinds of symbols I'd seen on the trees earlier, but these were different. These were protection symbols. Katie Thing jumped in front of us, her tree branch fingers reaching for her brother. But this time I didn't run. I held up the dream catcher and its light shot straight through her. For just a second I saw the real Katie inside, trapped and scared. Your sister's still in there, I told Tom. And so is my Sarah. The Wendigo doesn't kill its victims, it traps them, uses them to make itself stronger. James stumbled and fell. The bark had spread up to his neck now and his eyes were more red than human. I can hear it, he gasped. In my head, so many voices, all trapped for so long. That's when I understood what we had to do. It wasn't about running away anymore. It was about fighting back, saving everyone this thing had taken. The stone circle was only 30 feet away. Ancient tribal markings on the stones began to glow with a faint blue light, the same color as my dream catcher. A trap needs bait, I said, an idea forming. A dangerous, crazy idea. What do you mean? Tom asked, still holding on to his changing friend. The Wendigo is hungry for life, for spirits, I explained. That's why it takes people. But what if we gave it too much? What if we overloaded it? The forest spirit seemed to understand what I was thinking. The trees around us shook with anger, and Katie Thing let out a horrible screeching sound. I touched my dream catcher one last time, thinking of Sarah, of my grandmother, of all the love that had been woven into its web. Get James into the circle, I told Tom. No matter what happens, don't come out until it's over. What are you going to do? Tom asked, eyes wide with fear. I took a deep breath. I'm going to give the Wendigo exactly what it wants, me. The dream catcher grew hot against my skin as the forest spirit howled. It was time to end this, time to get my daughter back. And if that meant facing down an Ann, I ripped the dream catcher from my neck and held it high. You want a spirit? I shouted at the forest. Come and get one. The dream catcher's light pulsed like a heartbeat as Tom dragged James into the stone circle. The moment they crossed the line of stones, a blue light shot up from the ground, making a glowing wall around them. They were safe. Now it was my turn. The forest grew darker, like all the shadows were being pulled toward one spot. They swirled, together, forming the true shape of the Wendigo. It was enormous, taller than the redwoods, made of twisted black wood and dark spirits. Its eyes were like two blood-red moons, and its mouth was full of wooden teeth sharp as spears. Brave. Little Ranger, it rumbled, its voice shaking the ground. Coming to join your daughter. No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I came to take her back. I threw the dream catcher at the Wendigo's face. My grandmother had told me these dream catchers were special. They didn't just catch bad dreams, they caught spirits too. But I don't think even she knew just how special this one was. The moment it touched the Wendigo, the dream catcher grew huge, its web glowing like blue lightning. The Wendigo roared as the web wrapped around it, but it couldn't break free. That's when I heard them. Hundreds of voices, all the people the Wendigo had taken over the years. They were trapped inside it, their spirits feeding its power. And among them, Mom, Sarah's voice. Her real voice. "I'm here, baby," I shouted. "Follow my voice." The Dreamcatcher's web was pulling something out of the Wendigo, streams of light that looked like people. The trapped spirits were breaking free. The Wendigo thrashed and howled, trying to hold on to its prisoners. But a mother's love really is the strongest magic. The Dreamcatcher's web glowed brighter and brighter until I had to shield my eyes. There was a sound like thunder, and a flash of light so bright it turned night to day for just a second. When I could see again, the Wendigo was gone. In its place was a plain old dead tree, black and twisted. And all around me, people were appearing, spirits becoming solid again. Katie materialized next to her brother in the stone circle, confused but alive. Other lost hikers and rangers who had disappeared over the years stumbled around, looking dazed. Then I saw her. "Mom!" Sarah ran into my arms. She felt solid and real and alive. She hadn't aged a day. For her, it might have felt like no time had passed at all. I hugged her tight, crying and laughing at the same time. "I never stopped looking for you," I whispered. The forest was changing around us. The twisted trees straightened out, their bark returning to normal. The red sap disappeared. Even James was changing back, the bark falling off his skin like old gabs. My Dreamcatcher floated down from the sky, small again but still glowing faintly. As I caught it, I noticed something had changed. The web inside it had a new pattern now, one that looked like a mother and daughter holding hands. The sun broke through the fog for the first time all day. Birds started singing again, and the forest felt clean, like after a storm. But this wasn't quite the end. There was one more thing I had to do. I walked over to the dead tree that used to be the Wendigo. Using my ranger knife, I carved a warning symbol into its trunk, the same one my grandmother had taught me years ago. A warning to any other dark spirits that might think about moving into my forest. This place is protected by love. 1 month later. I'm still a ranger at Redwood National Park, but things are different now. Better different. Sarah sits beside me on our favorite log, eating a sandwich as we watch the sunset through the trees. She's catching up on 5 years of missed school, but she's doing great. Kids are amazing that way. They can bounce back from almost anything. Tom and Katie visit sometimes. They're doing okay too. Katie doesn't remember much about being tree-possessed, which is probably for the best. James recovered completely. Not even a scar left from where the bark had been. The other people who came back that day, hikers and rangers who'd been missing for years, they're all home with their families. Now, some remember everything, some remember nothing, but they're all alive, and that's what matters. My radio crackles. "Hey, Liz," Dave's voice comes through clear as day. "Got some hikers reporting weird noises near the old stone circle." I smile and press the button. "On my way." Sarah looks up at me worried. "Mom, is it—" "No, honey, the Wendigo's gone for good, but the forest still needs protecting." I touch the Dreamcatcher around my neck. It hasn't stopped glowing since that day, though now it's just a soft, gentle light. "Want to come help?" She grins and jumps up. "Really? Can I?" "Sure. You're a ranger's daughter, after all." We walk through the forest together, our footsteps crunching on pine needles. The redwoods stand tall and straight around us, healthy and normal again. Well, mostly normal. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, you can hear whispers in the yew. Trees, but they're different now, not scary anymore. They sound like thank yous, like gentle reminders that this forest is alive in its own special way. I've started teaching Sarah everything my grandmother taught me about the old ways, about respecting the forest and its spirits, the good ones anyway. The tribal elders come by sometimes too, helping us learn more about protecting this place. The Dreamcatcher works different now. Instead of catching bad dreams, it warns us when something's not quite right in the forest. Like an early warning system for ranger work. Pretty handy, actually. We reach the stone circle, which is now a protected historical site. The weird noises turn out to be just some owls who've made their nest in a hollow tree. Sarah helps me check on them, writing everything down in her junior ranger notebook. As we head back to the station in the growing dark, Sarah takes my hand. Mom, do you think there are other Wendigos out there? I squeeze her hand. Maybe. But they're not coming here. Know why? She grins. Because this forest is protected by love. That's right. I look up at the massive redwoods towering above us. They seem to bend slightly, like they're nodding in agreement. The sun sets behind the trees, painting the forest in orange and gold. My dream catcher glows softly, matching the color of the sunset. On nights like this, the forest feels magical, but the good kind of magical, the kind that makes you feel safe instead of scared. I still work as a ranger, protecting both the forest and the people who visit it. But now I know I'm not doing it alone. I have Sarah back, I have the memory of my grandmother's teachings, and I have a forest full of ancient redwoods that just maybe watch out for us too. Sometimes the scariest stories can have the happiest endings. You just have to be brave enough to live through them. And having a magical dream catcher doesn't hurt either. As for the whispers in the redwoods, well, they're still there, but now they sound like home. Winter came to the redwood forest, bringing cold mornings and early sunsets. Sarah and I were doing our evening patrol when we found something strange. Mom, look. Sarah pointed to the ground near the old stone circle. There, in the fresh snow, were footprints. But not human footprints or animal tracks. These looked like tiny bare feet, no bigger than a child's hand. My dream catcher gave off a soft blue pulse, but not its usual warning glow. This felt different, curious, not dangerous. Should we follow them? Sarah asked, already pulling out her junior ranger notebook. The tracks led us through the trees to a small clearing we'd never seen before. In the center stood a tiny house, built right into the trunk of an old redwood. It looked like something from a fairy tale, with a small round door, windows with actual glass, and even a tiny chimney with smoke coming out. Mom, Sarah whispered. I don't think the Wendigo was the only magical thing in these woods. My dream catcher glowed warmly, almost like it was saying hello. From inside the tiny house, we heard what sounded like singing, sweet and gentle like wind chimes in a breeze. A small note was pinned to the tiny door. In beautiful handwriting, it read, "To the forest guardian and her daughter, thank you for bringing balance back to our home. Not all spirits are dark. Some of us just want to help the forest grow. The little folk of the redwoods." Sarah looked at me with shining eyes. Can we come back tomorrow? I smiled, remembering what my grandmother used to say. The forest shares its magic with those who protect it. Sure, I said, but this is our secret, okay? Some kinds of magic need to stay hidden to stay special. As we walked home in the growing dark, little lights began to twinkle in the trees around us, like stars had come down to dance in the branches. The dream catcher sparkled in response, and the forest felt alive with gentle magic. The whispers, the redwoods had changed again. Now they sounded like laughter, the happy kind, the kind that makes you want to laugh too. Sarah grabbed my hand. Mom? Yeah. I think this is going to be our best winter ever. Looking at the joy on her face, and the magic all around us, I knew she was right. We'd faced the darkest spirit in these woods and won. Now it was time to meet the friendly ones. After all, every forest needs a balance. For all the scary stories out there, there are just as many wonderful ones. You just have to be brave enough to find them. And Sarah and I, we were ready for our next adventure, just maybe a less scary one this time. It was my first night shift since everything happened with the Wendigo. Sarah was sleeping over at her friend's house, and the forest felt different in the dark. My flashlight beam cut through the fog as I walked my usual patrol route. The dream catcher around my neck glowed softly, providing just enough light to see where I was stepping. Everything okay out there, Liz? Dave's voice crackled through my radio. All quiet, I replied. But just as I said that, my dream catcher pulsed 3 times, our new signal for something's not quite right. I stopped walking and listened. The night sounds were normal at first, owls hooting, branches creaking in the wind. Then I heard something else. Music. It was coming from the direction of the old stone circle. Not scary music, but not exactly happy either. It sounded like someone was playing a flute made of wood, the notes floating through the trees like fallen leaves. My first thought was teenagers having a late-night party, but my dream catcher wasn't giving its usual warning glow. Instead, it was pulsing with a gentle green light, something it had never done before. As I got closer to the stone circle, I saw them, tiny lights about knee-high dancing between the trees. They moved like fireflies, but bigger, and they seemed to be following the music. I switched off my flashlight. Sometimes my grandmother used to say, "You see more in the dark." That's when I noticed the musician. Sitting on one of the old stones was a figure about the size of a 10-year-old, but definitely not a child. Its skin looked like bark, but smooth and silvery in the moonlight. It was playing a flute carved from a branch, and the lights were dancing to its song. The figure looked up and saw me. I expected it to vanish like magical things usually do in stories, but it didn't. Instead, it smiled and kept playing. My radio crackled. "Liz, everything okay? You've been quiet for a while." The figure put a finger to its lips, not telling me to be quiet, but asking politely if I could keep it secret. I smiled and pressed my radio button. "All good, Dave. Just enjoying the night music." Music? I don't hear anything on my end. Just the forest sounds, I said, watching the lights dance. "You know how musical the woods can be at night." The figure nodded approvingly and played a happy little trill on its flute. The light spun faster, creating patterns that looked like stars falling through the trees. I found a comfortable spot to sit, and did what any good ranger would do. I watched over them, making sure they were safe to play their midnight music. After all, that's my job now. Protecting all the inhabitants of my forest, even the ones that only come out at night. The figure played until nearly dawn. As the sky started to lighten, it stood up, bowed to me like we were at a concert, and simply faded away. The dancing. Lights winked out one by one like stars going to sleep. I wrote in my ranger log, "Night patrol, all quiet. Musical performance at Stone Circle. Attendance, 1 ranger, 1 forest musician, and several dancing lights. No incidents to report." Because sometimes the best way to keep a magical secret is to write it down where nobody would think to look for it, in the most ordinary place possible. As I walked back to the station in the early morning light, I smiled thinking about how much had changed. A few months ago, any strange sound in these woods would have scared me. Now I know better. Not everything mysterious is dangerous. Sometimes it's just the forest having a little fun. But I still keep my dream catcher close, just in case. The lightning that killed my partner wasn't normal. I've been a park ranger at Mount Rainier for 15 years now, and I've seen hundreds of storms, but that day was different. The bolt didn't come from above, it came from the ground. And it was blue. My name is Michael Harrison, and I'm 47 years old. Most people call me Mike. I used to be a smoke jumper. One of those crazy folks who parachute into forest fires to put them out. Now, I spend my days watching over Mount Rainier National Park in Washington State. It's usually a peaceful job, but lately things have been strange. I keep my old lucky compass with me all the time. It was a gift from my dad when I first became a ranger. These days, though, it's been acting weird. The needle spins in circles sometimes like it's drunk or confused. At first, I thought it was broken, but all the other compasses in the park are doing the same thing. Today started like any other fall morning in the alpine meadows. The air was crisp, and the grass was covered in frost that crunched under my boots. But something felt off. The clouds above the mountain were moving in ways they shouldn't. I've studied weather patterns my whole life. It's kind of my thing. And clouds aren't supposed to swirl like that, especially not against the wind. The animals know something's wrong too. Yesterday I saw a whole herd of elk running down from the higher slopes, their eyes wide with fear. Bears are leaving their usual feeding grounds, and even the birds have gone quiet. In all my years here, I've never seen anything like it. There's this spot in the park, not far from my cabin, where some old totem poles stand near an ancient native burial ground. The local tribes don't come here much anymore, but they've always said this place was special, sacred. Now I'm starting to understand why. Every time I walk past those totem poles, my skin tingles like I'm standing too close to a power line. Last night, I saw something that I can't explain. I was doing my evening patrol when the temperature suddenly dropped. I could see my breath in the air, even though it was only September. Then I noticed these patches of cold, spots where the air was so chilly it made my teeth hurt. And in those cold spots, my radio would go crazy, spitting out static and weird noises that sounded almost like words. But the worst part? The footprints. I found them this morning near one of the cold spots. They were huge, bigger than anything I've ever seen, and the grass around them was scorched black like something incredibly hot had walked there. Or something electric. I know how this all sounds. If someone had told me this story a few weeks ago, I would have thought they were making it up. But after what happened to Tom, my old partner, well, let's just say I'm keeping my eyes open and my lucky compass close, because something is out there in my park. Something that can control the storms, and I have a feeling it's only getting started. The other rangers think I'm paranoid. They say I've been different since Tom's accident. Maybe they're right. Watching your best friend get struck by impossible. Lightning would change anyone. But they haven't seen what I've seen. They haven't noticed how the clouds are gathering, darker and thicker each day, swirling around the mountain like they're being pulled by something. Something that wants to be found, and I think I'm the one who has to find it. This morning I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The weather radar in my office showed storm clouds forming in a perfect circle around the mountain. I've been studying weather for 20 years, and clouds just don't do that. It's like something was drawing them in, like a magnet pulling paper clips. I called Jenny, our weather station expert, but her equipment was acting up too. "Mike," she said, her voice shaky over the phone. "All our instruments are going crazy. The wind sensors say it's blowing in 4 different directions at once. That's impossible." I grabbed my gear and headed out to check things for myself. The air felt heavy like right before a big storm, but worse. My skin was tingling, and my hair stood on end, the way it does when there's too much static electricity in the air. The strange thing was, there wasn't a storm anywhere near me. The clouds were still far off, circling the mountain like hungry wolves. As I walked through the ancient forest, the huge old trees were creaking and groaning. Not the normal way trees move in the wind. This was different. They were bending away from something, like they were trying to escape. The pine needles under my feet were standing straight up, pointing at the sky. Static electricity again. Then, I saw the lights. They weren't like any lights I'd seen before. They floated between the trees, blue-white and flickering. At first I thought they were some kind of reflection, but they moved on their own, dancing through the forest like curious fireflies. When I tried to take a picture with my phone, it died instantly. Brand new battery, completely drained. That's when I heard it. A low rumble that wasn't quite thunder. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My lucky compass started spinning wildly, and I felt the temperature drop so fast my breath came out like smoke. I found more footprints too. They were fresh this time, still smoking slightly. Each one was twice the size of my boot and deep, like whatever made them was incredibly heavy. The weird part was how they started and stopped randomly, as if whatever made them could appear and disappear at will. A group of hikers came running down the trail, looking scared. "There's something up there," one of them said, pointing up the mountain. "We saw it during the lightning. It was huge and it glowed." I radioed back to base, but all I got was static and strange pulsing noises. Through the static, I could have sworn I heard something like words, but not in any language I knew. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The animals were getting more scared too. I found a group of deer huddled in a meadow, trembling. They didn't even run when I got close, like they were more afraid of something else than they were of me. Above them, the clouds were starting to pulse with weird leads. Back at my cabin that evening, I tried to make sense of it all. I spread out my maps and weather charts on the table. The strange events weren't random. They formed a pattern, all centered around the old burial grounds. The cold spots, the weird lights, the magnetic problems, they were all getting stronger and happening more often. I took out the old newspaper article about Tom's death. The reporter had written it off as a tragic accident, a ranger in the wrong place during a storm. But now I knew better. The burn marks around Tom that day, they were exactly like the ones I was finding now. My radio crackled to life suddenly, making me jump. Through the static, I heard what sounded like thunder, but it had a rhythm to it, like it was trying to tell me something. Outside, the lights in the clouds were getting brighter, and that weird humming was getting louder. Whatever this thing was, this creature that could control storms and electricity, it wasn't just passing through. It was searching for something. Or maybe it was trying to warn us. I looked at the old totem poles through my window, their carved faces lit up by the strange lights in the sky. The local tribes had stories about a powerful spirit that protected these mountains. I used to think they were just legends. Now I'm not so sure because something is coming, something big. And I have a feeling that tomorrow I'm going to find out exactly what it is. I woke up early the next morning to the sound of my phone going crazy. All my weather alerts were going off at once. The storm system around the mountain had grown overnight, but it wasn't moving like normal storms do. It was just waiting. I needed answers, so I decided to visit Sarah Running Bear, an elder from the local tribe who worked in our park's cultural center. If anyone knew about the old stories of this place, it would be her. "The signs you describe," she said, her eyes serious as she poured us both coffee. "They match our people's stories about the Thunder Walker." My hands tightened around my coffee. "Oh, Thunder Walker? A powerful spirit," she explained. "Half creature, half storm. Our ancestors said it appeared in times of danger, when the sacred lands needed protection." She paused, looking out the window at the strange clouds. "It was said to walk between lightning strikes and speak through thunder." Just then, my radio crackled. Through the static, I heard Dave, one of our newer rangers, shouting, "Mike, you need to see this. Up by the North Ridge. Something. The trees are all twisted, and there's this light." I grabbed my gear and rushed out, but not before Sarah grabbed my arm. "Be careful," she warned. "The Thunderwalker doesn't like people disturbing sacred ground." The drive up to the North Ridge was scary. My truck's electronics kept failing. The headlights would flicker, the radio would cut out, and twice the engine just died completely. The air felt thick, like before a huge storm, and my skin wouldn't stop tingling. I found Dave standing by a group of trees that looked like giant hands had grabbed them and twisted them like pretzels. The bark was scorched black, and the air smelled like burning metal. The same smell I remembered from the day Tom died. "Look, at this," Dave pointed to something on the ground. It was a perfect circle about 20 feet across, where all the grass had been flattened and burned. In the middle was one of those huge footprints, but this one was different. It glowed slightly, giving off a faint blue light. I took out my phone to take a picture, but before I could, everything electronic we had went dead. Our radios, phones, flashlights, all at once. The air got so cold I could see our breath, and that's when we heard it. It started as a low hum, like power lines in the rain. Then it grew louder, and the sound shifted into something that was almost like words. The trees around us began to creak and bend, and all the little rocks on the ground started vibrating. "Mike," Dave's voice was shaking. "Look up." Above us, the clouds had formed a perfect spiral, like a giant whirlpool in the sky. Blue lightning jumped from cloud to cloud, but there was no thunder, just that strange humming sound getting louder and louder. Then we saw it. At first, it looked like a shadow between the trees, but bigger than any animal I'd ever seen. It was hard to look at directly, like trying to stare at a lightning bolt. Its shape kept changing, sometimes looking almost human, sometimes more like a giant bear made of storm clouds and electricity. Dave started backing away slowly. What is that thing?" Before I could answer, a bolt of blue lightning struck the ground between us and the creature. The flash was so bright it left spots in my vision. When I could see again, the thing was gone, but it had left more footprints, leading toward the burial grounds. "We need to get back to base," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Now. But as we turned to leave, our truck's engine wouldn't start. The whole vehicle was dead, like everything else electronic near that thing. We'd have to walk back. That's when the temperature dropped again, and we heard something that made us both freeze. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps getting closer. The sound of thunder rolled across the sky, but this time it had a pattern to it, like words in a language I almost understood. "Dave," I whispered, "don't move." Through the trees ahead of us, something blue was glowing. It was coming closer. The humming sound got so loud it made my teeth hurt. Static electricity made our hair stand on end, and tiny sparks jumped between our fingers. The Thunderwalker was coming back, and this time, I had a feeling it wanted to do more than just show itself. I remembered what Sarah had said about sacred ground and protection. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't randomly attacking. It had a purpose. And somehow, I knew that if we were going to survive, we needed to figure out what that purpose was. Fast. Dave and I stood perfectly still as the blue glow got brighter. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the strange humming in the air. Then we heard something that made my blood run cold. Voices on our dead radios. They weren't normal voices. They sounded like thunder and static mixed together. But they were definitely trying to say something. Our radios shouldn't have been working at all. Their batteries were completely dead. "Mike," Dave whispered, "what do we do?" Before I could answer, something caught my eye. The totem poles near the burial ground were glowing with the same blue light as the footprints. And then it hit me. I'd seen this light before in old photographs from the 1950s. Back then, the Park Service had tried to build a new road through this area. Every time they started construction, strange electrical problems stopped them. They finally gave up after 3 workers got badly shocked by what they called lightning from the ground. The creature appeared between 2 trees, and this time we got a clear look at it. It was enormous, maybe 12 feet tall, and its body looked like a storm cloud that had taken the shape of a massive bear or ape. Blue lightning sparked all around it, and its eyes glowed like 2 blue stars. Where it stepped, the ground crackled with electricity. That's when I remembered something else Sarah had told me. The Thunderwalker appears when the sacred lands need protection. I looked around and spotted something I hadn't noticed before. Survey markers. New ones. Someone was planning to build something here, on the burial grounds. "Dave," I said quietly, "we need to get back to the station. I think I know what's going on." But the Thunderwalker had other plans. It raised one huge arm, and all the survey markers in the area ripped out of the ground, pulled by some kind of magnetic force. They flew through the air and landed in a pile at our feet. The creature's form flickered like lightning, and suddenly it was standing right in front of us. This close, I could feel the electricity coming off it, like standing next to a giant battery. The humming sound turned into words that seemed to echo inside my head. Protect. Sacred. Ground. Dave looked like he was about to faint. I didn't blame him. But something in those words made sense to me. This thing wasn't trying to hurt us. It was trying to tell us something. I slowly reached down and picked up one of the survey markers. "These," I said, holding it up. "You don't want these here." The creature's eyes flashed brighter, and our radios crackled again. "Builders, coming, stop them!" Just then we heard engines in the distance. Through the trees, I could see construction vehicles moving up the old service road, bulldozers, and excavators. They weren't supposed to be here. Someone had started construction without proper approval. The Thunderwalker turned toward the sound, and the sky above us turned dark as night. Lightning began jumping from cloud to cloud, and the air filled with static electricity so strong it made my teeth hurt. "We need to stop them," I said to Dave. "Those machines can't come up here." But before we could do anything, 3 more Rangers appeared on the trail behind us, Jack, Maria, and Pete. They had their rifles raised, pointed at the creature. "Don't," I shouted. "It's not attacking. It's protecting." "Mike, get back," Jack yelled. "That thing killed Tom." No, I said. Tom died because we didn't understand. This spirit has been protecting these grounds for hundreds of years. We're the ones who keep trying to destroy them. The Thunderwalker turned to face the Rangers, lightning crackling all around it. The construction vehicles were getting closer. In a few minutes, they would reach the burial grounds, and I had a terrible feeling about what would happen then. I had to make a choice. Let my fellow Rangers attack a spirit that was only trying to protect sacred land, or try to stop them and risk losing my job, or worse. But then I remembered something my dad told me when he gave me my lucky compass. Sometimes doing the right thing means standing your ground, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy. I took a deep breath and stepped between the Thunderwalker and the Rangers, spreading my arms wide. Listen to me, I said. All of you. We need to stop those bulldozers. Now, or something terrible is going to happen. The sky grew darker and the humming got louder. We were out of time. Whatever was going to happen next would change everything. I just hoped I was making the right choice. Time seemed to freeze as I stood there between my fellow Rangers and the Thunderwalker. The construction. Vehicles were getting closer. I could hear their engines growling up the mountain road. "Mike, you need to move," Jack said, his rifle still raised. "That thing is dangerous." "No," I said firmly, thinking of Tom. "We were the dangerous ones. We never listened. We never understood." I turned to face the Thunderwalker, its blue eyes glowing like stars in its storm cloud face. But I understand now. The creature's form flickered, and suddenly the air was filled with images, like lightning photographs frozen in the air. I saw the land as it was hundreds of years ago, when the local tribes buried their dead here. I saw how they honored the Thunderwalker as a protector, and I saw what would happen if those bulldozers reached this place. "Look," I pointed at the glowing images. "It's showing us why it's here." The other Rangers lowered their weapons slowly, their faces filled with wonder as they watched the story unfold in the air around us. Maria's radio suddenly crackled to life, even though it had been dead moments before. Through the static, we heard Sarah Running Bear's voice. "Mike, the construction company, they're trying to build a new resort. They faked the permits. They're destroying sacred burial grounds." The Thunderwalker's eyes flashed and storm clouds gathered overhead, spinning like a giant whirlpool. The construction vehicles were almost here. "We have to stop them," I said to my fellow Rangers. "Not just for the Thunderwalker, but because it's the right thing to do." Jack looked at the creature, then at me. "Okay," he said finally. "What's the plan?" But before we could do anything, the first bulldozer broke through the trees. The driver's eyes went wide when he saw the Thunderwalker. He tried to back up, but his engine died, just like everything else electronic near the creature. More vehicles appeared behind the bulldozer. The Thunderwalker raised its arms, and lightning began to dance between its fingers. The air hummed, so loud it hurt. "Wait!" I shouted, both to the creature and the construction workers. "Nobody needs to get hurt." I walked toward the bulldozer, my hands raised. "This is protected land," I called out to the drivers. "You're building on sacred burial grounds and your permits are fake. Leave now or I'll have no choice but to let him protect this place his way." The construction workers looked at the Thunderwalker, then at their dead vehicles, then at each other. Slowly they started climbing out, hands raised. "We didn't know," one of them said. "The boss just told us to clear the land. He never said anything about burial grounds." The Thunderwalker lowered its arms and the lightning faded a little. The humming grew softer, almost gentle. Through our radios, we heard its voice again, clearer than ever. "Protect together." I looked at the creature and nodded. "Yes," I said, "we'll protect it together. No one will disturb this place again." The construction workers backed away, heading down the mountain on foot. Jack got on his satellite phone, which somehow still worked, and called the Park Service and the Tribal Council. Within hours, the whole area would be officially protected. As the sun began to set, the Thunderwalker's form started to fade. But before it disappeared, it turned to me one last time. A bolt of blue lightning struck the ground at my feet, leaving behind a small glowing stone. I picked it up carefully. It hummed softly in my hand, and my lucky compass pointed straight at it no matter which way I turned. I understood the message. I was now part of the protection of this place. The Thunderwalker vanished in a flash of light, but we could still feel its presence. The burial grounds were safe, and now they had more than just one guardian looking after them. In the weeks that followed, things changed at Mount Rainier. The construction company's illegal plans were exposed. The tribal council and the Park Service worked together to protect the sacred lands. And on stormy nights, when blue lightning dances in the clouds over the mountain, we know the Thunderwalker is still watching. I kept the glowing stone in my cabin, right next to my lucky compass. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that familiar humming sound, and my compass needle spins in a circle as if saying hello to an old friend. People ask me if I was scared, standing between armed rangers and a legendary spirit. The truth is, I was terrified. But sometimes being brave means being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Now when I walk my patrol route, I pay more attention to the old stories, to the land, and to the signs that most people miss. Because I learned something important up on that mountain. Not all monsters are evil, and not all legends are just stories. Sometimes they're warnings. Sometimes they're calls for help. And sometimes, if we're wise enough to listen and brave enough to act, they can change us for the better. As for the Thunderwalker, the storms still come to Mount Rainier, and sometimes in the heart of those storms, people say they see a huge shape walking through the lightning. But these days, it's not hunting anymore. It's protecting, and it's not alone. I've seen a lot of strange things in my 20 years as a park ranger, but nothing like this. Nothing that made my blood run cold just thinking about it. My name is Michael O'Sullivan, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't just in bedtime stories. It all started on an October evening at Mount Marcy. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when I first noticed something wasn't right. The temperature dropped, so fast it made my teeth chatter. One minute I was comfortable in my light jacket. The next I could see my breath forming clouds in front of my face. That's weird, I muttered to myself, checking the thermometer outside my ranger station. It had dropped 20 degrees in less than an hour. That's not normal, even for the Adirondacks. The next morning I found the first dead deer. Its body was frozen solid like it had been stored in a giant freezer. But here's the thing. It was still early fall and the weather had been mild until yesterday. The deer's eyes were wide open, frozen in what looked like pure terror. I'd seen plenty of dead animals in my time, but this was different. This one looked like it died from fear before the cold got to it. Over the next few days, I kept finding more frozen animals. Rabbits, foxes, even a bear cub. All frozen solid, all with the same terrified look. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 hunters had gone missing in separate areas of the park. Just vanished, leaving their camping gear behind. I was logging the 3rd missing person report when my radio crackled to life. The voice that came through belonged to John Redhawk, an elder from the local Native American community who often helped us with search and rescue. Michael. His voice was grave, different from his usual friendly tone. We need to talk. Can you meet me at Eagle Point? When I met John at our usual spot overlooking the valley, his weathered face looked troubled. He didn't waste time with small talk. The signs are here, Michael. The unnatural cold, the frozen animals, people disappearing. He looked me straight in the eyes. Our ancestors spoke of this. An ancient evil that walks these mountains when the veil between worlds grows thin. I'd known John for years. He wasn't the type to spook easily or believe in silly superstitions. If he was worried, that meant I should be too. What kind of evil are we talking about, John? Before he could answer, my radio burst into static. Through the white noise, I heard one of my junior rangers, Tommy, his voice shaking. Chief, you need to see this. Oh, God, I'm by the North Trail. Please hurry. I found Tommy throwing up behind a tree. 20 feet away lay the body of Mark Stevens, one of our missing hunters. He was frozen solid, his face twisted in a silent scream. The strange thing was, the ground around him was completely dry. No ice, no frost, nothing. just the body frozen like a statue in a museum of horrors. That evening, as I drove back to my station, I noticed something that made me slam on my brakes. The trees along the road were covered in impossible ice formations, crystals that grew upward, defying gravity. They looked like frozen fingers reaching for the sky. My radio, which had been giving me trouble all day, suddenly came alive with a burst of static so loud it made me jump. Through the noise, I heard something that wasn't a human voice. A sound, like cracking ice mixed with a deep, hungry growl. That's when I knew John was right. Something evil had awakened in my mountains, and I had a horrible feeling this was just the beginning. The temperature gauge in my truck showed 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Yesterday at this time, it had been 55. Looking at those ice-covered trees in my rearview mirror, I realized I wasn't just dealing with a search and rescue mission anymore. I was dealing with something that shouldn't exist. The next morning, I got a call that made my heart sink. Another hunter had been found, and this time it was worse. Much worse. I drove out to the site with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The victim was David Chen, a local fisherman who'd gone hunting for the weekend. His body was like the others, frozen solid, but parts of him were missing, like something had been feeding. I knew I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I needed help, and I needed it fast. By noon, I had my team assembled in my office. Jack Martinez, our best wilderness guide, sat quietly by the window. He could track anything through these mountains and knew every cave and trail like the back of his hand. Dr. Rachel Thompson, our Forest Service vet, was looking over the photos of the frozen animals, her forehead wrinkled with concern. The Walsh brothers, Kevin and Paul, both rangers from the South Station, stood near my desk. They were good men, the kind you want watching your back when things go wrong. Here's what we know, I said, pinning photos to my board. 4 people missing, 2 found frozen, animals showing up like ice sculptures, and temperatures dropping. Like crazy in specific areas. Like something's targeting certain spots, Rachel said, tapping her pen against her notepad. The cold isn't natural. It's too focused. Jack cleared his throat. There's a cave system up near Eagle Ridge. Might be worth checking out. Local tribes used to say it was sacred ground. We grabbed our gear and headed out. The cave Jack mentioned was about 2 hours' hike from the nearest road. As we walked, I noticed how quiet the forest had gotten. No birds singing, no squirrels running through the trees. Just our footsteps crunching on dead leaves and the sound of our own breathing. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for one person at a time. Our flashlights showed ancient paintings on the walls, stick figures and symbols in red. But one image kept repeating, a tall, skeletal figure with antlers, surrounded by what looked like swirls of ice and snow. Guys, Paul Walsh whispered, his flashlight beam shaking slightly. You need to see this. At the back of the cave, we found fresh claw marks on the walls. Not from a bear or any animal I knew. These were huge, deep gouges in solid rock, like something had been sharpening massive claws. That's when we heard it. A sound that didn't belong in our world. Like ice cracking, but mixed with something else. Something that sounded almost like words. We spun around, flashlights darting everywhere, and there it was, blocking the cave entrance. A figure so tall it had to stoop under the cave ceiling. Looked like someone had built a giant skeleton out of ice and stretched pale gray skin over it. Antlers grew from its head, covered in frozen blood. Its eyes glowed with a blue-white light that made my insides feel like they were freezing. "Run," I shouted. "Back of the cave, now!" We scattered as the creature lunged forward. The air around it was so cold it burned to breathe. Paul got separated from us in the chaos, taking a side tunnel while the rest of us went deeper into the cave. When we finally found another way out and regrouped outside, Paul was missing. We searched for hours. Just before sunset, we found him. He was standing in a small clearing, but something was wrong. He wasn't moving. When I got closer, I realized why. He had been turned into ice. His face was frozen in a look of pure terror, one arm raised like he'd been trying to shield himself. From something, Kevin fell to his knees beside his brother. The sound he made? I'll never forget it. It wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of someone's world shattering. That night, huddled in my office with the team, we pieced it together. The creature we saw matched old stories of the Wendigo, a spirit of winter and hunger. But this one was different from the legends. This one could control ice itself, and it was getting stronger. Rachel studied the weather patterns on my computer. "Look at this," she said, pointing to temperature readings. "The cold spots are forming a pattern. It's like it's creating its own hunting grounds, making places cold enough for it to..." "To what?" Jack asked. "To hibernate," she said quietly. "It's storing food for winter, and we're the food." We all sat in silence, letting that sink in. Outside my window, snow had started to fall, even though it was still October. The Wendigo was changing our mountains, making them into something else, something darker, and we were the only ones who knew what we were really dealing with. The Wendigo didn't wait long to strike again. We were hiking back to check on Paul's frozen body when the storm hit. It came out of nowhere. 1 minute. The sky was clear. The next we could barely see 10 feet ahead through the swirling snow. "Stay together," I shouted over the howling wind. But it was like the storm had a mind of its own, pushing between us, separating us. Kevin was the first to go. I heard him yell something about seeing movement in the trees. Before we could stop he ran ahead, probably thinking he could get revenge for his brother. We heard his scream a few seconds later. When we found him, my stomach turned. The Wendigo had created spikes of ice that burst up from the ground. Kevin hadn't stood a chance. Rachel grabbed my arm. "Michael, look at the trees!" The ice was spreading like a disease, crawling up the trunks, turning the forest into a frozen wasteland. The temperature had dropped so low our breath froze in front of our faces. That's when we heard it. That horrible sound again, like cracking ice and hungry growls. But this time it was coming from all around us. "It's hurting us," Jack said, his voice shaking, "like a wolf pack does." We ran, but the Wendigo was always one step ahead, blocking paths with walls of ice, forcing us where it wanted us to go. Rachel seemed to realize what was happening first. "It's driving us toward the old fire tower," she shouted. She was right. Through the swirling snow, I could see the tower's dark shape ahead. But before we could change direction, the Wendigo appeared. Right in front of us, Rachel shoved me hard. "Run! I'll distract it." Rachel, no, but she was already running, waving her arms and shouting. The Wendigo turned to follow her, its glowing eyes fixed on its new target. I tried to go after them, but Jack held me back. "She's giving us a chance," he said. "Don't waste it." We never saw Rachel again. Jack and I made it to the fire tower, but something was wrong with him. He was shivering, but not from the cold. His eyes had started to get a bluish glow. "Michael," he whispered, his voice changing, becoming more like the sound of breaking ice. "I can feel it, in my head." I backed away as Jack's body began to twist and stretch. The Wendigo hadn't just been hunting us, it had chosen a new host. I watched in horror as my friend's skin turned gray, and his eyes blazed with that terrible blue light. I remembered what John Redhawk had told me earlier that day, when I'd called him in desperation. He'd given me an ancient knife, its silver, blade covered in symbols. "Fire and blessed silver," he'd said. "It's the only way." The thing that used to be Jack lunged at me. We crashed through the fire tower's old door, rolling across the frozen floor. Outside, the storm raged harder than ever. I fought against Jack's transformed body, trying to reach the knife in my belt. His strength was incredible, inhuman. His hands were turning to claws, his teeth becoming sharp and icy. "I'm sorry, Jack," I whispered, and plunged the silver knife into his heart. The scream that came from him wasn't human anymore. The Wendigo's spirit poured out of him like frozen mist, taking shape above us. Now I could see it clearly, the true form of the monster that had been terrorizing my mountains. I grabbed the emergency flare from my belt and sparked it. The Wendigo recoiled from the heat and light, but it wasn't enough. It reached for me. With its massive claws, that's when I saw the cans of old fuel in the corner of the tower. Without thinking, I threw the flare at them. The explosion was like a mini sun. The Wendigo's screech was so loud it shattered every window in the tower. I felt its cold trying to fight against the fire, but the blessed silver knife had weakened it. Finally, with a sound like a glacier breaking apart, the creature burst into thousands of icy shards that melted in the flames. As I limped down from the burning tower, the unnatural storm began to fade. The forest slowly came back to life. I could hear birds again, and the ice started to melt from the trees, but I couldn't shake what I'd seen in those ancient cave paintings. There hadn't been just one Wendigo in those images. There had been many, scattered across different mountain ranges. Sometimes at night, when the wind blows just right, I think I hear ice cracking in the distance. And I wonder, how many more are out there waiting for their turn to wake up? Maybe that's why I'm still here, keeping watch over these mountains. Because now I know the truth. Monsters are real. And someone needs to be ready when they decide to hunt again. 1 year has passed since that terrible October. Spring came and melted away the last traces of the Wendigo's ice. But some things never thawed. The frozen bodies of Paul and Kevin Walsh were buried together in the town cemetery. Rachel's body was never found, though we placed a memorial for her near her favorite hiking trail. And Jack, well, we told everyone he died trying to save others during a freak storm. It wasn't exactly a lie. I still work as a ranger at Mount Marcy. Some people thought I was crazy for staying, but I couldn't leave. Not when I know what's really out there. John Redhawk visits me more often now. He's been teaching me about the old ways, about how to spot the signs. We've marked all the caves with protective symbols, and I keep that silver knife close, always. Last week I got a letter from a ranger in Colorado. She described finding frozen animals in the middle of summer, and temperatures dropping for no reason. I called her immediately. The caves, I told her. Check the caves for claw marks and paintings. And whatever you do, don't go alone. Some nights, when the wind blows cold through the trees, I sit on my cabin porch and listen. The tourists think I'm just being friendly when I tell them to be back before dark, when I check their camping permits twice and mark their locations carefully on my map. They don't know I'm really counting them, making sure everyone who goes into my mountains comes back out again. Because I learned something that night in the fire tower. Something that keeps me up when the temperatures start to drop. There are more Wendigos out there, maybe dozens, sleeping in mountains across the country, waiting for their time to wake up. And when they do, they'll be hungry. I keep a journal now, writing down everything I remember about how we fought the Wendigo. Someday, another ranger might need this information. They'll need to know about the blessed silver, about the fire, about how these creatures can possess people when they're desperate, about how they can make you see things, make you hear voices in the storm. Yesterday, I found fresh claw marks on a tree near the North Trail. They were small, like maybe something was just starting to change, to grow. I radioed in some extra patrols and warned the hikers about dangerous weather conditions heading our way. Tonight, there's a cold snap coming. The weather report says it's normal for this time of year, but I know better now. I can feel it in my bones, that same unnatural chill from last October. I check my emergency pack. Flares, silver knife, first aid kit, radio. The sun is setting. Earlier these days, and the shadows in the forest seem darker, deeper. Something is stirring in my mountains again. But this time, I'm ready. And if you're ever hiking in the mountains, any mountains, and you feel a sudden cold that freezes your breath and makes your heart skip a beat, if you hear something that sounds like cracking ice and hungry growls, don't try to be brave. Don't try to figure out what it is. Just run. Run as fast as you can, back to warmth and light and other people. Because now you know what I know. The Kurdi legends are real, the monsters are real, and they're hungry. The ground swallowed Mrs. Chen whole. 1 minute she was there, taking photos of the sunset-colored rocks with her brand-new camera. The next minute, gone. Just like that. No scream, no warning. The earth simply opened up and took her, leaving behind only her dropped camera and one blue sneaker. I've been a ranger at Petrified Forest National Park for 15 years, just like my mom before me, and her mom before that. But I've never seen anything like this. My name is Maria Delgado, And this is how the nightmare began. It started 3 weeks ago with the holes, perfect circles in the ground, appearing overnight like giant cookie-cutter marks in the desert floor. At first, we thought they were sinkholes, natural things that happen sometimes when underground caves collapse. But these were different. These holes had smooth walls like they were carved by something or someone. Then came the artifacts. Ancient pots and tools started showing up on the surface, arranged in weird patterns like a spiral. In my years, as a ranger, I'd never seen artifacts just pop up like this. They're usually buried deep, waiting for archaeologists to carefully dig them up. But these? It was like something was pushing them up from below, displaying them on purpose. The local tribe elders came to the park office one morning. I'll never forget the look on old Joseph's face when he told me, "The burial grounds are angry, Maria. Something's been disturbed that should have stayed sleeping." I didn't want to believe him. I'm a modern person. Sure, my grandmother taught me about spirits and old ways, but I deal with tourists and park maps and wildlife reports. Normal stuff. But then my little brother Miguel showed up unannounced at my ranger cabin. "Something bad is coming, sis," he said the moment I opened the door. Miguel has always been different, more sensitive to things others can't see. When we were kids, he would know when storms were coming hours before the clouds appeared. I had dreams about this place, about you. You need to leave, but I couldn't leave. This park isn't just my job, it's my home. 3 generations of Delgado women have protected these ancient forests turned to stone. And now something was wrong here, really wrong. The petroglyphs came next, new ones appearing on rock faces that I check every single day on my patrols. Twisted figures with 2 long limbs, dancing around spirals that match the patterns of those unearthed artifacts. The other rangers said it had to be vandals, but I knew better. The marks were carved deep into the rock, like they'd been there for centuries, yet I swear on my life they weren't there the day before. Then the animals started leaving. First the small ones, rabbits, lizards, snakes, all heading south like it was suddenly winter. Then the coyotes and deer followed. In just 2 days, the park became eerily quiet. No bird songs in the morning, no scurrying sounds in the brush. Nothing. I was doing my evening patrol when I heard Mrs. Chen's tour group screaming. By the time I got there, there was just that lonely blue sneaker at the edge of a perfectly round hole, still warm from her foot. Looking down into that endless darkness, I realized old Joseph was right. Something had woken up in my park, something hungry. And I had a horrible feeling that Mrs. Chen was just the beginning. Miguel put his hand on my shoulder as we stared into the hole. "It's starting," he whispered. "The shadows are dancing in the desert now. I saw my grandmother last night. The only problem is she died 5 years ago. I was walking near Split Rock, checking the new holes that had appeared, when I heard her voice calling my name. Mijita, she said, just like she used to when I was little. She was standing there in her favorite blue dress, looking exactly like I remembered her. But something was wrong. Her feet weren't touching the ground. "You're not my grandmother," I whispered, backing away slowly. That's when her face changed. It was like watching clay melt and reshape itself. The thing that wasn't my grandmother smiled with too many teeth, and its eyes turned yellow like a coyote's. I ran. I've never run so fast in my life. The next morning, I called everyone I could think of who might help. Thomas Running Bear, an E5 elder medicine man who knew my grandmother, came right away. So did Dr. James Peterson, a geologist who studies the park's rock formations. My fellow ranger Rick Martinez joined us too. He's been my friend since training days, and I knew I could trust him. We sat in my cabin, drinking coffee and trying to make sense of things. Dr. Peterson spread out his maps on my kitchen table, pointing at where all the holes had appeared. "They make a pattern," he said, drawing lines between them, like a huge spiral with the center right where the old burial caves are. Thomas Running Bear nodded slowly, his weathered face serious. "The creature you saw, Maria, we call it a skinwalker, but this one is ancient, from before the time of cars and cities. It has slept in the earth for centuries, and now something has woken it up." But why now? I asked. Why here? Before anyone could answer, we heard screaming outside. Rick was already running, and I followed close behind. One of the holes had appeared right under the visitor parking lot. As we got closer, I saw someone's hand reaching up from the edge of the hole. Rick grabbed it and pulled. It was just a hand with nothing attached to it. Rick stumbled backward, and that's when the ground opened up beneath him. I lunged forward, but I was too late. The earth swallowed him whole, just like Mrs. Chen. His scream echoed up from the darkness until it faded to nothing. My brother Miguel found us staring at the hole. His eyes were strange and glassy. "The earth is hungry," he said, but his voice didn't sound like his anymore. "It wants what was taken from it." Thomas pulled me back and started chanting in his native language, spreading a line of some kind of powder in a circle around us. "Your brother," he said quietly. "The skinwalker has touched his mind. We need to protect him before—" Miguel's head snapped toward us, and his face began to change just like my grandmother's had. But this was worse. This was my baby brother. Dr. Peterson was frantically flipping through an old book he'd brought. "These markings," he said, pointing to some faded pictures, "they're exactly like the new petroglyphs. They tell a story about an ancient guardian that protected sacred burial grounds. If we can find the original text," Miguel, or what used to be Miguel, stepped toward us. The ground cracked under his feet, and rocks began floating in the air around him. His eyes were completely black now, like empty holes in his face. "The shadows are hungry," he said in a voice that wasn't human, "and you are all trespassing." I felt tears running down my face as I pulled out my Ranger pistol with shaking hands. I didn't want to hurt my brother, but as I watched him raise, his arms and the earth begin to ripple like water around us, I knew we were running out of options. Thomas grabbed my arm. "There's another way," he said urgently. "But we'll need to work fast. The blood moon is coming tomorrow night, and that's when it will be strongest." I looked at my brother's twisted face and knew I had to try anything, everything, to save him. Even if it meant facing something that could control the earth itself. Even if it meant fighting an ancient evil that had woken up hungry after centuries of sleep. Behind us, the sun was setting over the painted desert, turning the sky blood red. And somewhere deep underground, I could hear something laughing. The moon turned red as blood that night, just like Thomas said it would. We spent all day getting ready. Thomas told us everything he knew about the skinwalker while we worked. "This isn't just any spirit," he explained, drawing symbols in the dirt. "This is the guardian of the graves. Long ago, when white settlers first came here, they disturbed many burial grounds. The tribal elders created this spirit to protect our dead. But over time it grew too powerful, too angry. It started hurting innocent people, so they trapped it underground," Dr. Peterson added, looking up from his old books. "Right here in these caves." "But what woke it up?" I asked, watching my brother Miguel pacing back and forth like a caged animal. We had him tied up in Thomas's protective circle. It hurt to see him like that, but it hurt even more to see that thing wearing his face. "The new highway construction," Dr. Peterson said quietly. "They've been blasting near the old burial caves. Must have broken whatever was keeping it asleep." Thunder rolled across the sky, but there weren't any clouds. The red moon rose higher and Miguel started screaming. Not with his voice, but with something ancient and angry. That's when the ground began to shake. The skinwalker rose up from the earth, like a nightmare coming alive. Looked like a person made of shadows and stone, with yellow eyes that glowed like hot coals. All around us, the ground cracked and split. Rocks flew through the air like they were caught in a tornado. "Now!" Thomas shouted, throwing some kind of powder into the air. Dr. Peterson started reading from an old paper, his voice shaking but determined. But the skinwalker was strong, stronger than anything I'd ever seen. With one wave of its hand, it sent a wave of earth that knocked Thomas off his feet. I watched in horror as he seemed to age years in seconds, his hair turning white, his skin wrinkling until he just crumbled away like dust. Dr. Peterson kept reading. even as rocks started falling all around us. "Maria!" he yelled over the noise. "The circle! You have to complete the circle!" I knew what he meant. Thomas had drawn half of a huge circle of symbols around the burial caves. We needed to finish it to trap the skinwalker again. I started running, drawing the symbols in the dirt with the special mixture Thomas had prepared. The skinwalker roared, a sound that made my teeth hurt, and sent a boulder flying at me. Dr. Peterson jumped in front of it. I heard the crash, and then he was just gone. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely draw. Behind me, Miguel broke free of his ropes. His eyes were completely black now, and he moved like a puppet on strings. "Little sister," he said, in that horrible voice that wasn't his. "Stop fighting. Join us in the earth." "That's not you, Miguel," I said, crying as I kept drawing. "Fight it, please." For just a second, I saw my real brother in his eyes. "Maria," he whispered, sounding scared. "Help me." Then the blackness took over again. He lunged at me, but I was ready. I had my grandmother's old silver necklace. Thomas said silver might help. I threw it around Miguel's neck. He screamed, both Miguel and the thing inside him. I held him tight as he thrashed, crying and whispering, I'm sorry," over and over. Then he went still. I didn't have time to cry. The skinwalker was coming, and I still had to finish the circle. I ran, drawing faster than I ever thought I could. The ground was breaking apart all around me, but I didn't stop. Just as the skinwalker reached for me, I drew the last symbol. The effect was instant. All the floating rocks dropped. The ground stopped shaking. And the skinwalker, it started getting pulled back toward the burial caves, screaming in rage. "You cannot stop us," it shrieked as it was dragged into the earth. "We are many. We are everywhere. We will rise." Then everything went quiet. The moon turned back to its normal silver color, and I was alone with what I'd lost. I buried Miguel next to our grandmother, with Thomas's tribal songs playing on an old tape recorder. Dr. Peterson's family put up a plaque in his honor at the park entrance, and every night, I walked the boundaries of the burial caves, checking the symbols, making sure they stay strong. Because the skinwalker was right about one thing. There are more of them out there. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind blows just right, I can hear them whispering from deep underground. They're still hungry, they're still angry, and they're still waiting to rise. I still do my rounds at the park every day. Things look normal now. Tourists taking pictures, kids collecting rocks until I kindly ask them not to, and the desert sun baking everything in its usual way. But things aren't really normal, not for me. Every morning I check the symbols around the burial caves. I learned them all by heart. Thomas made sure of that before he left us. Sometimes I find new cracks in the ground, tiny ones that most people wouldn't notice. But I notice. I fill them with a special mixture of salt and herbs, just like Thomas taught me. I keep a journal now, writing down everything I see that seems odd, the way some rocks move a tiny bit between my morning and evening rounds, how the birds go quiet at exactly 3:17 p.m. every day, the strange shadows I sometimes catch moving in the corner of my eye. Dr. Peterson's daughter Sarah visits sometimes. She's a geologist too, and she brings equipment to check for any movement underground. Last week, her machines picked up something strange, like a heartbeat, deep below the surface. It could be natural, she said, but we both knew better. I visited Miguel's grave yesterday, left his favorite blue baseball cap there. As I was sitting by the stone, talking to him like I always do, a little girl walked up to me. She was maybe 7 or 8, with bright, curious eyes. "Are you the ranger who fights monsters?" she asked. Her mom rushed over, apologizing. She heard some stories from the local kids, she explained, embarrassed. I just smiled and told the little girl, "I'm just a park ranger who protects the land, that's all." But later that night, as I sat on my cabin porch watching the moon rise, I heard that familiar whisper on the wind, the one that sounds like my grandmother, or sometimes like Miguel, the one that tries to make me doubt what I know is real. I put on my ranger hat, checked my flashlight batteries, and grabbed my bag of protective herbs. Just another night patrol in Petrified Forest National Park, because that's what we Delgado women do. We protect this land. From tourists who try to steal petrified wood, from people who want to vandalize the petroglyphs, and from things that sleep in the deep dark under the desert, dreaming of the day they'll wake up again. I am Ranger Maria Delgado. This is my park. And as long as I'm here, nothing, human or otherwise, is going to hurt it. But sometimes when the moon is full and red, I hear them calling. More voices now, not just one. They're patient. They're ancient, and they're getting stronger. Note found in Ranger Delgado's daily log. If you're reading this and you're wearing a ranger badge, remember, always check the symbols at sunrise and sunset. Never patrol alone during the red moon. If you hear a voice you know belongs to someone dead, run. And most importantly, if you see the shadows start to dance, call me. I'll be there. Because some things in this desert never truly die. They just wait. The scream I heard that morning still haunts me. It wasn't the usual cry for help we get from lost hikers or injured climbers. No, this was different. A sound that made my blood run cold. A sound that didn't belong in these mountains. I'm Amanda Hayes, a park ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park, and this is the story of how everything I knew about these peaks changed forever. Part 1. The vanishing, it started 3 weeks ago. Jenny Chen, an experienced climber, vanished from her rope while scaling Thunder Ridge. Her climbing partner swears she was there 1 second, secured to her harness, and gone the next. Just gone. The only trace left was her chalk bag, swinging. The wind. I've been doing search and rescue in these mountains for 12 years. I know every crack, every hold, every possible place where a climber could fall. But this was different. Jenny wasn't the last to disappear. 2 days later, we found Marcus Thompson, or what was left of him. His body was pressed against a cliff, face pale as winter snow, completely drained of blood. 20 years of mountain rescue experience, and I'd never seen anything like it. The strange marks around his climbing harness looked like claw prints, but not from any animal I knew. The other rangers tried to blame it on mountain lions or bears, but I've tracked every predator in these parts. This was something else, something that could climb straight up sheer rock faces, something that could snatch experienced climbers right off their ropes. Then came the earthquake. Not a big one. Just enough to shake loose some rocks near Old Miners Pass. But it opened up something that should have stayed buried. A shaft, pitch black and older than any mine records we had. The entrance was odd. The rocks around it were scratched with symbols I'd never seen before. That's when Billy Two Eagles, one of our local guides, pulled me aside. His grandfather used to tell stories about these mountains. Stories about things that lived in the deep caves. Things that could walk on walls and ceilings. Mountain devils, the elders called them. I used to think they were just tales to keep kids from wandering too far. I didn't believe in monsters, not until last Tuesday when I saw it. I was checking the safety lines on Eagles Point at sunset. Movement caught my eye. Something dark moving fast across the vertical cliff face. Not climbing, walking. Like gravity meant nothing to it. Its body was wrong, too many joints, too fluid. When it turned its head, I don't have words for what I saw. Now I'm putting together a team. Because whatever's out there is getting bolder. More climbers are missing. More families want answers. And those ancient mine shafts are calling us down into the dark. I just hope we're ready for what we'll find below. My name is Amanda Hayes, and this is how our nightmare began. I stood at the entrance of the mine shaft, watching my breath make little clouds in the cold morning air. The team I'd picked was the best we could get, but looking at their faces, I could tell they were just as scared as I was. Everyone check your gear one last time, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Radio check. John Running Wolf was the first to respond. He's lived in these mountains his whole life, and his family has been here for generations. He's not much for talking, but his eyes see everything. Right now, Those eyes were fixed on the cave entrance like he was trying to read a warning written in the rocks. Next to him, Dr. Peter Nash kept fiddling with his geology equipment. He's usually excited about rocks and cave formations, but today, he looked pale. "These readings don't make sense," he muttered, tapping his devices. "The magnetic field around the cave entrance, it's all wrong." Ranger Mike Collins, my friend of 8 years, gave me a nervous smile. He's usually the one cracking jokes, but not today. "Ready when you are, Amanda," he said quietly. Kate Wilson, our cave expert, was already checking the ropes. She's been in more caves than anyone I know, but even she looked worried. "The air coming from down there, it's not moving like it should." I clicked on my headlamp and took one last look at the sky. The morning sun felt warm on my face, and part of me wanted to stay right there in the light. But people were still missing. We had a job to do. "Stay close," I said. "Any sign of trouble, we radio for backup and get out. Clear?" Everyone nodded. One by one, we started down. The tunnel wasn't like any mine shaft I'd seen before. The walls were too smooth in some places, like they'd been melted. Our lights caught strange marks that looked more like claw marks than pickaxe strikes. The air got colder with every step down. After about an hour, we reached a huge cave chamber. That's when things started getting weird. Kate spotted it first, rocks floating in midair, like gravity had just given up. Dr. Nash tried to explain it with science words, but his voice was shaking. "My grandfather spoke of this," John said softly. "Places where the old laws of nature break, where things that should stay below can walk on walls and ceilings. We found cave paintings next, deep red marks on black stone. They showed stick figures running from shapes that hurt my eyes to look at." Dr. Nash started taking pictures, his hands trembling. That's when we heard Kate scream. She'd been just behind me, checking some formations. By the time I spun around, she was gone, just gone, like Jenny Chen on the cliff. "Kate," I shouted. The cave threw my voice back at me, making it sound wrong. Different. Mike ran to where she'd been standing. "There's another tunnel here," he called. Wait." His voice changed, became strange. "Amanda, something's wrong. My skin, it feels..." I turned my light toward him and froze. Black veins were spreading across his face like cracks in ice. His eyes, they weren't his eyes anymore. "Run!" John grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "It's starting, the changing, we have to go." But I couldn't move, because right then, in the beam of my headlamp, I saw something crawl across the ceiling. Something that used to be human, and it was smiling at us. The real horror was just beginning. My flashlight beam shook as I watched Mike, or what used to be Mike, crawl across the cave ceiling. His movements were all wrong, like a spider with too many joints. I wanted to scream, but I knew that would only make things worse. "We have to find Kate," I whispered to John and Dr. Nash. "She has to be alive somewhere down here." Dr. Nash's face was wet with tears. "But Mike, we can't just leave him like this." "That's not Mike anymore," John said quietly. His hands were steady as he pulled something from his backpack, a small leather pouch filled with what looked like red sand. "My people have stories about this, about how to stop it." A horrible screech echoed through the cave. More shapes moved in the darkness beyond our lights. The missing climbers, or what was left of them, down there. Dr. Nash pointed his light toward a deeper tunnel. "The magnetic readings are strongest from that direction. If Kate's anywhere, she'll be there." We had to crawl through a narrow passage to reach it. I could hear things moving behind us, getting closer. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might burst. The tunnel opened into the biggest cave I'd ever seen. Our lights couldn't even reach the ceiling, and there, stuck to the walls like cocoons in a spider's web, were bodies. Some were moving. "Kate!" I spotted her near the bottom, still in her climbing gear. She wasn't moving, but I could see her, chest rising and falling. She was alive. Dr. Nash rushed to help me get her down, but then he froze. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Look up." Hundreds of the creatures clung to the cave ceiling. They were changing, growing, their bodies twisting into shapes that shouldn't exist. And in the middle of them all was Mike, his skin now completely black, his eyes glowing like distant stars. "They're evolving," Dr. Nash said. "Using our bodies to become something new. We have to seal this place. Now." He grabbed his bag of explosives, the ones we'd brought for emergency cave-ins. John stepped forward, the red sand trickling through his fingers. He started speaking in his native language, his voice growing stronger with each word. The creatures shrieked. Mike, the thing that was Mike, dropped from the ceiling, landing like a cat. "Stop him!" The voice wasn't human anymore. Dr. Nash shoved the explosives into a crack in the wall. "Get Kate. I'll set the charges." I ran to Kate's cocoon, cutting her free with my knife. She was cold but breathing. John's voice grew louder, the red sand now swirling in the air around him like a storm. The ceiling creatures started falling, their bodies twisting in pain. Mike lunged at John, but the red sand touched him and he screamed, a sound of both pain and relief. "Run!" Dr. Nash yelled. "The charges are set." I threw Kate over my shoulder. "John, come on." But John stood his ground, the sand now glowing like fire. "This is what the ritual requires," he said calmly. "A life freely given. Go." Dr. Nash grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the tunnel. Behind us, I heard the first explosion, then another. The cave started shaking. We ran until our legs gave out, until we couldn't hear the screams anymore. Until we saw the first hint of daylight ahead. When we finally reached the surface, the sun was setting. Kate was starting to wake up. Dr. Nash collapsed beside me, both of us gasping for air. We sealed the entrance with more explosives, posted warnings, told the families something close to the truth, that their loved ones were gone, that the caves had claimed them. But sometimes on quiet nights, I stand at my cabin window and look at the mountains, and I wonder if we really stopped them all. 'Cause the marks I saw in those caves, they weren't just in one tunnel. There are more out there, more nests, more dark places where the rules of our world don't work right. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can hear them. Calling, my name is Amanda Hayes, this is my story, and I pray you never have to live through anything like it. But if you're climbing in these mountains, and you see strange marks on the rocks, or feel like gravity isn't working quite right, run. Run as fast as you can, because they're still hungry and they're still changing. The end, I still work as a ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park. Some people think I'm crazy for staying, but this is my home. Besides, somebody needs to keep watch. Kate recovered in the hospital. She doesn't remember much from her time in the cocoon, and maybe that's for the best. She moved to Florida, said she'd had enough of mountains for one lifetime. Can't blame. Her Dr. Nash stuck around. He's different now, quieter. We meet for coffee sometimes, but we never talk about that day. The dark circles under his eyes tell me he's not sleeping much either. They sealed off that whole section of the park, put up signs about unstable ground and toxic gas. People believe it because it's easier than believing the truth. John running. Wolf's family held a ceremony for him. His grandmother gave me his journal afterward. It's full of old stories about the mountains, about things that live in the deep places. I keep it in my desk drawer, just in case. Sometimes hikers report strange sounds at night, or climbers say they see weird shadows moving on the cliff faces. When that happens, I go out myself to check. Most times it's nothing, just wind or animals, or scared people jumping at shadows. But sometimes, last week I found those same claw marks on a boulder near Silver Creek, 3 parallel lines, deeper than any bear could make. And the air around it felt wrong, like gravity was taking a lunch break. I radioed it in and got a team out there fast. We used John's red sand. His grandmother taught us how to make it. Sealed up another entrance before anything could get out. That's my job now. Not just saving lost hikers or helping injured climbers. I'm a gatekeeper, a watcher, because those things are still down there in the dark spaces between the rocks. Still hungry, still changing. And sometimes, on stormy nights when I can't sleep, I think about Mike, about how human he looked right up until he wasn't. I wonder if some part of him is still alive down there in the darkness, still aware, So I keep John's journal close, keep my radio closer, and I watch the mountains, because that's the thing about darkness. It's patient. It can wait, but so can... My name is Amanda Hayes, and if you're ever hiking in these mountains and something feels wrong, like the shadows are too deep or gravity isn't quite right, find me. I'll be here, because some stories don't end. They just pause. And somewhere in the dark, something is still smiling. Author's note: this completes the Dark Peaks, following Amanda's journey from the first disappearances through the cave confrontation, and into her new role as guardian of these dangerous secrets. The story maintains its grounded, realistic tone, while suggesting ongoing threats, leaving readers with both closure and lingering unease. A dark shape in the fog. A voice that shouldn't be there. Sometimes the forest keeps its secrets, but this time, I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Prologue. The scream woke me up at 2 a.m. Not the usual kind that haunts my dreams from my army days. This one was real, echoing through the quiet forest outside my ranger station. My German Shepherd Max was already at the window, his fur standing straight up. I'd never seen him like that before. I grabbed my flashlight and ranger jacket, checking my radio as I headed for the door. The spring air bit through my clothes, and somewhere in the darkness another scream split the night. This one was different. It started as a woman's cry but turned into something else. Something that made Max whimper and press against my leg. Control. This is Ranger Cooper. Got reports of disturbance in Section 7 of Ozark National Forest. Going to check it out. The radio crackled. Copy that, Cooper. Be careful out there. Storm's coming. I'd been a ranger here for 5 years, ever since coming back from Afghanistan. The forest was usually my peace, my escape from the memories that followed me home from the war. But tonight something felt wrong. The air was too still, the shadows too deep. My flashlight beam cut through the fog as Max and I followed the trail. The trees looked different in the dark, their branches reaching like bony fingers. I found the first footprint about half a mile in, a bare human foot pressed deep into the mud. But the next print, just a few feet away, wasn't human at all. It looked like a wolf track, but bigger than any I'd ever seen. My heart started pounding as I remembered the reports that had been coming in over the last few months. 3 hikers gone missing without a trace. A twig snapped behind me. Max growled, low and warning. I turned, sweeping my light through the trees, and that's when I heard it. My ex-wife's voice calling my name. Danny, Danny, help me. But Sarah had moved to California 2 years ago. She couldn't be here. My hands started shaking as I grabbed my radio again. Control, something's not right out here. I'm going to need... The rest of my words died in my throat. Through the fog, about 50 feet ahead, something was standing up. It looked like a man at first, but it was too tall, 7 feet at least. And as my flashlight beam hit it, I saw its eyes reflect back at me like an animal's. Then it smiled, showing rows of teeth that no human should have. That was the night everything changed. The night I learned what was really hiding in the missing mile of Ozark Forest. I just wish I could forget what happened next. Part 1. The reports begin. The next morning, I couldn't shake off what I'd seen. I sat at my desk, staring at the incident. Reports that had been piling up. 3 hikers missing in 3 months. That wasn't normal for our forest. Sure, people got lost sometimes, but they usually turned up within a day or 2. I spread out the maps and marked where each person had disappeared. My coffee went cold as I noticed something that made my stomach drop. All the disappearances formed a perfect circle around an area we rangers called the Missing Mile, a patch of forest so thick and rocky that even experienced hikers avoided it. My phone rang, making me jump. It was Bill Tucker, one of the local hunters I'd known for years. "Danny, you need to hear this," he said, his voice shaking. "I was out checking my deer stands this morning and I heard my daughter calling for help. But Danny, my daughter's away at college in Texas." I felt that same cold feeling from last night. "Bill, don't go looking for that voice. I'm coming to you. Where are you?" "Near Cedar Creek by the old..." The line went dead. I grabbed my gear and whistled for Max. He came, but something was off. Max was my bravest partner. He'd faced down angry bears without flinching, but now he moved like he was afraid of his own shadow. The drive to Cedar Creek took 20 minutes. The morning fog still hadn't lifted, making the forest look like it was underwater. I found Bill's truck parked by the trailhead, but no sign of him. Max refused to leave the truck, whining in a way that made the hair on my neck stand up. That's when I saw the tracks again. The same ones from last night. Human footprints that turned into huge wolf tracks, like something out of a nightmare. But this was real. The mud was still wet, the tracks fresh. I followed them to a small clearing and stopped cold. Bill's hunting vest lay torn on the ground. Next to it was his phone, the screen cracked but still showing our cut-off call. The weirdest thing, there was blood on the leaves, but it made no sense. The patterns were all wrong, like the blood had fallen upward somehow. I clicked my radio. "Control, get me Deputy Harding. And tell her to bring Linda Morrison, the cryptozoologist from the university. Cooper, what's going on out there?" I looked at the impossible blood patterns and the tracks that couldn't exist. "I don't know, but I need someone who studies things that aren't supposed to be real." As I waited, I heard rustling in the bushes. Then a whisper that sounded exactly like Bill. "Danny, help me." I grabbed Max and ran back to the truck. Sometimes being brave means knowing when to get help, because deep down, I knew what we were dealing with wasn't human, and it was hunting us. Part 2. The team form's deputy Sarah Harding arrived first in her police cruiser. She'd been my friend since I started this job, and I could tell by her face that she knew something was seriously wrong. Sarah wasn't the type to scare easily. She'd grown up in these woods and knew them as well as I did. "I brought Linda," she said, nodding to the red-haired woman getting out of the passenger side. "Found her already heading this way after hearing about the missing hikers." Linda Morrison looked more like a hiker than a scientist, wearing cargo pants and carrying a heavy backpack full of equipment. She went straight to the tracks I'd found, kneeling down to take pictures with her camera. "Fascinating," she said, pulling out a measuring tape. "The human prints are size 12, but the wolf tracks, they're twice the size of a normal wolf's." She looked up at me. "And you say they change from one to the other?" Before I could answer, we heard branches breaking in the forest. A man emerged from the trees holding a rifle. I recognized Frank Turner, one of the best hunters in the area. He looked pale and shaken. "Found you by following the police sirens," Frank said. "I've been tracking something strange for weeks. Thought I was going crazy until I heard about Bill." Sarah pulled out her notebook. "Tell us exactly what you saw." "Frank, it was tall, real tall, standing on two legs like a person, but..." He stopped, like he was afraid to sound stupid. "It had a wolf's head. And yesterday I heard my brother calling for help. Except my brother died 2 years ago." Linda was typing everything into her tablet. "The local legends mention something like this. A creature that can change shape and copy voices to lure people into the woods. Legends don't leave tracks," Sarah said, but she was looking at the strange blood patterns on the leaves. "And legends don't make blood defy gravity." Max suddenly started growling, staring into the trees. We all went quiet. Through the fog, we could see something moving. It was big, and it was walking on 2 legs. "Everyone back to the vehicles," I whispered. "Now." But Linda stepped forward instead, raising her camera. "Wait, I need to document this." The thing in the fog turned toward us, and then we heard Bill's voice again, coming from where it stood. "Danny, why didn't you help me?" Sarah grabbed Linda's arm and pulled her back. This time, nobody argued about leaving. As we hurried to our vehicles, I knew we'd just become a team, whether we wanted to or not. Because whatever was out there, it knew we were coming for it, and it was getting ready for us. Part 3. Into the dark, we set up our base at my ranger station. Linda spread out her research papers on my desk while Frank cleaned his rifle. Sarah radioed for backup, but a storm was moving in. We were on our own until morning. "Look at this," Linda said, pointing to her tablet. Every missing person was last seen near sunset, and they all reported hearing loved ones' voices before they disappeared. "That's how it hunts," Frank said, quietly. "It finds out who you miss the most and uses their voice to draw you in." A loud crack of thunder made us all jump. Rain started hammering on the roof, and the wind howled through the trees. But something about that howl wasn't right. It sounded almost human. Max's ears perked up. He ran to the window, barking like crazy. Through the rain-streaked glass, we saw movement in the parking lot. A figure was standing there, tall and human-shaped, but something was wrong with its shadow. It seemed to shift and change in the darkness. "The missing mile. It's never come this close to buildings before," Linda whispered, reaching for her camera. The lights in the station flickered and went out. In the darkness, we heard footsteps on the porch, then a scratching at the door. But the worst part was the voice, my voice, calling from outside. "Sarah, Linda, Frank, let me in, it's Danny. The creature's right behind me." Sarah drew her gun. "Cooper's right here with us." "Good thing you noticed," Frank said. "Because I almost—" The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Max leaped forward, snarling. Through the broken window, I saw a giant wolf-like head, but its eyes looked human. "Run!" I shouted. "Through the back door." We grabbed what we could and ran into the rain. I heard Max fighting behind us, his brave barks turning into a yelp of pain. I wanted to go back for him, but Sarah grabbed my arm. "We can't help him now," she yelled over the storm. "The shed! We need to get to the shed!" We splashed through, puddles to my storage shed. Frank yanked the door open and we piled inside, slamming it behind us. Our flashlight beams bounced around the small space, lighting up garden tools and old equipment. Linda was checking her camera, hands shaking. "I got pictures. It's real. It's all real." "Shh." Sarah raised her hand. Through the rain, we heard something padding around the shed. Heavy footsteps that didn't sound quite human, didn't sound quite animal. Then we heard Max's bark again. But it wasn't coming from the station. It was coming from right outside our door. My dog's friendly, familiar bark. But Max was gone. We all knew he was gone. The thing outside was learning. It was getting better at its tricks. And we were trapped. Part 4. The hunted thunder crashed overhead as we huddled in the shed. Frank aimed his rifle at the door while Linda dug through her backpack with shaking hands. "Wait," she whispered. "I read something. Here." She pulled out an old book. Local hunters used to protect themselves with silver. They said it was the only thing that could hurt these creatures. Sarah checked her gun. "My backup piece has silver bullets. My grandfather insisted I always carry some. I thought he was just being superstitious." The footsteps outside got closer. Then we heard Bill's voice again. "Help me, please." It changed to Frank's brother's voice, then to my ex-wife's. The voices started mixing together like a broken radio switching channels. "Look," Frank pointed at the walls. Shadows were moving under the door and through the cracks between boards. The creature was trying to find a way in. Linda's camera flashed as she took pictures through a gap. She gasped. It's changing shape. I can see it happening." A massive paw with half-formed fingers smashed through the wooden wall. Sarah fired 2 shots. The silver bullets hit their mark. We heard a howl of pain that didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. The creature backed off, but we could still hear it circling. Linda checked her camera screen, then turned pale. "Oh no." "What?" asked. "The pictures. There's more than one shadow. I think it has pups." As if answering her, we heard smaller sounds joining the bigger ones outside. Lighter footsteps, younger voices calling out. Frank grabbed a shovel from the wall. "There's a storm drain behind the shed. If we time it right—" "We can't stay here," Sarah said. "It's just playing with us now." I found my old army flashlight, the big metal one that could also be used as a weapon. "I'll go first. When I say run, everybody head for my truck. It's the closest." "Danny," Sarah said quietly, "your truck is too far. But the old church is just through those trees, the one made of stone." She was right. The abandoned church was only about 50 yards away. We might make it. Suddenly, the scratching and movement stopped. The voices went quiet. That was worse than the noise. Now we couldn't tell where they were. I put my hand on the door handle. Everyone gripped their weapons tighter. "Ready?" I whispered. They nodded. I yanked the door open, and our world exploded into chaos. Part 5. The final stand rain poured down as we ran. Lightning flashed, showing shadows moving between the trees, some big, some small, all of them coming for us. Frank was the first to fall, his boot catching on a root. He screamed as something dragged him into the darkness. "Keep running," Sarah shouted, firing her silver bullets at the shadows. The creatures howled in pain, backing off for a moment. Linda was right behind me, her camera flashing as she ran. "I got it! I got its transformation on camera!" But her victory was short-lived. A huge shape burst from the bushes, its body caught between wolf and human. Linda's last scream was cut short as the creature grabbed her. My heart was pounding as Sarah and I reached the church. We slammed the heavy wooden doors shut behind us, pushing an old bench against them. Lightning flashed through the stained glass windows, casting weird shadows on the stone walls. "Danny," Sarah said, checking her gun. "I've got 3 silver bullets left." Before I could answer, we heard Linda's voice outside. "Help me, I'm hurt, but I'm alive." Then Frank's voice joined in. "Let me in, please." "Don't listen," Sarah warned. But the voices kept coming, mixing with the storm, getting louder and more desperate. The wooden doors began to crack. Huge claws pushed through, tearing at the wood. Sarah fired 2 shots through the gaps. More howls of pain, but the claws kept coming. Then we heard young voices, children crying for help. Sarah hesitated, her hand shaking on her gun. That moment of doubt was all it took. The doors burst open. The creature that entered wasn't trying to look human anymore. It was massive, with matted fur and eyes that glowed in the darkness. Behind it, smaller shapes moved, its pups, learning to hunt. Sarah fired her last silver bullet, hitting the big creature right in the chest. It staggered back, but one of its pups leaped forward. I watched in horror as Sarah was knocked down, her throat torn out before I could reach her. I was alone now. Lightning flashed again as I backed up against the altar. The big creature was hurt but still coming. In desperation, I swung my metal flashlight at the stained glass window above me. It shattered, and moonlight poured in. Moonlight shining through the silver coating on the old church window. The creature screamed, a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. Where the silver-tinted light touched it, its fur began to smoke. It tried to back away, but I grabbed a broken piece of the silver-backed glass and charged forward. The fight was brutal and quick. I felt teeth and claws tear into me, but I didn't stop until the silver glass was buried in the creature's heart. It fell, its body twisting between wolf and human shapes before finally going still. The pups fled into the night, their howls fading into the storm. I slid down against the altar, my wounds bleeding but not fatal. As the storm began to pass, I could hear sirens in the distance. Help was finally coming, but too late for my friends. I looked at the creature's body, already beginning to decay at an impossible rate. By the time help arrived, there would be little evidence of what really happened here, just like all the other stories of the missing mile. But I know the truth, and I know those pups are still out there, growing, learning, waiting. Sometimes at night, I hear familiar voices calling from the woods. My friends, my ex-wife, even Max. But I don't answer anymore. Because in the missing mile, the voices that call your name aren't the ones you want to follow. The end.